You don't need the.
I'm doing this my way. He a legend. 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 He a legend.
Fucking on it though. Then
He
you
a
can't work it up later.
Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league of Iron. Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league of Iron.
What's up, everybody? NFL Week 1. And we have Billy with us. As we've mentioned in the past, Billy has won a couple dollars on NFL. I am not an NFL expert. I don't pretend to be an NFL expert. I do better probably betting real life than I do on DraftKings in the NFL. So we're all really here to pick Billy's brain on what he thinks is good and where he's looking. We'll try to get some information about how he makes his lineups. So Billy, how's it going? How's NBA life treating you?
It's going well. NBA life is, just paying the rake on these 2-game slates, which is a ton of fun for everybody, right?
Yeah. Brutal. Yeah, it doesn't matter what sport it is. When DraftKings gets into we're going to steal your money mode, it's real sad for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, like, I could, in theory, stop playing, once they get down to just 2-game slates, but that just seems absurd. So,
it's been real tough.
I guess thinking about it, they could have thrown out some 3-gamers with, like a 2-day thing, but that's always a little not so fun too. The overnight hold, wait and see what happens. So, but like you said, we have NFL now. Our first really big slate in 6-7 months, which is cool. I think NFL season sort of crept up on me in general. I think like everybody, I don't love the preseason, but it normally sort of teases you for that month before you get the real thing. So it sort of feels like it's just surprise here, which is nice.
Yeah. So basically, the game plan for today is go game by game. We'll talk a little bit about the money line, over under, and spread in every game. But the main goal of this is to figure out which plays we like. We'll try to take what the public is doing into consideration, what all the big industry information providers are saying. But for the most part, it's just going to be what Billy and I think about the individual matchups and our favorite plays. Of course, there will be bias involved because there are players that I like more than other players and players that I like avoiding and just tendencies and stuff like that. But we're going to go through every single game, and then we're also going to create an almost perfect lineup with our favorite plays. Not necessarily a lineup that we would play, but just a spot where you can see all of our favorite plays by the end of this. So before we get into everything, I have a few questions for Billy. So, first question. Were you a high-volume player before you won the Millie Maker?
So I don't know, honestly. Like, I have my group of friends that play DraftKings a little bit, but I don't know what people consider high volume. I would play usually 20 lineup. I would play 20. I'd make 20 lineups every week, and I would play them in anywhere from $500 worth to maybe close to $1,000 worth of tournaments. Which is, maxing out the $4 and then maybe some single entries. So it's not I think that's more than the
average player.
But I think once you get to people who are watching streams and stuff, it's probably closer to average, right? Once you sort of take out the guys that are just throwing in a $3 lineup just for fun, in 5 minutes on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So that. So maybe kind of a little bit sort of.
Yeah. I think
is my answer.
That's probably more than most people.
Oh yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
But it's
paying attention.
Yeah, sure. I guess when I hear high volume, I think
max entering,
Awesemo, and guys that have 50, 100 grand on the table. So the high end of the curve there is so high that $500 all of a sudden is again, it's not nothing, but it's if you're a high volume range, it's 500 to 10 grand.
Yeah.
It's pretty wide.
Yeah, not a complete degenerate, but not degenerate. Fair enough.
Yeah, but more of a degenerate in terms of the time investment than the money investment.
like an obsessive, like
Yes,
most people who
without a
watch this
doubt.
video will be. Yeah.
I definitely spent all of my free time doing it, even if the dollar value was not indicative of that.
Yeah. So next question: do you use your own projections?
I from I've split in past years. I'm hoping to refine my sort of like amateurish projection system that I have over the next couple weeks, so that it's ready to go once we have a couple weeks of 2020 data. My what I'll be using for the first couple weeks of the season and what I used last year, which I didn't love, but it sort of got the job done, especially early when people are figuring things out, is taking a weighted average of public / like quasi public, pay for projections, and then adding some adjustments to those based on some back tests that I've done on their projections in the past.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for myself and for what I'll be discussing in these videos, it's mostly from Daily Roto. I like what they do, and they have some ways that you can kind of adjust their projections pretty easily in their website. So that's generally who I use. I like them.
Yeah. So I haven't in the past couple months with like everything shut down. But I think another great stream, especially for NFL stuff, is Manny Laura. For anyone who hasn't checked him out, a lot of stuff on roster construction. It's not your typical just like who do you like this week. It's really about sort of if you want to get into like the strategy of like how do you play DFS and sort of the meta of DFS, if you will. And he over the past couple of years, along with some of his users and viewers, they've done like a simple correlation test of a couple different public projections, and Daily Roto, if I remember, was at the top of the list over the past like 2 or 3 years. I use 4for4 and PFF. 4for4 has been it really accurate over the past 5-10 years. John Paulson's one of the best projection guys in the game, I think. And then PFF, I think that given the other info they put out there, you can get, I think we have a good sense of sort of how they think about and put together their projections, which I appreciate sort of, being able to understand that. So they don't rank as high on that list. Everybody's pretty close, but I like their rankings for that reason.
Okay, cool. And then going into week 1, are there any specific contests you're looking at specifically?
So I always, me and my buddy Steve, who's like my main consigliere on DFS stuff among my group of friends, every week 1 for NFL, try to like talk each other into like not going overboard, not playing in all these contests. You don't know anything. Everything's always crazy. And then by Sunday morning, we're both just like emptying our rolls on every contest in sight.
Yeah.
So right now, my plan, I maxed out the $5, 150 like million to first contest, and a couple mini maxes below that. Okay. Last year I would play my biggest contest would be the $9 150 slant max every weekend, the slant. Yeah. It's ironic, but I think that the Millie Maker is like just such a bad investment generally, like the $20 one. Again, like when I was playing, before when I wasn't playing full time, it was like I was looking for a lottery ticket. But last year I was really focused on ROI. I didn't do great in DFS. I lost a little bit of money last year. Okay. Did much better in season long. But with NFL, I think, it's 20 slates, right? It's such a short season. Yeah. So that's
okay.
that.
Last question before we get in. When you won the Millie Maker, how many entries did you have?
I had 20. Every week that season, even after, I might have gone up to 25 like the week after, but I was still working full time, and even now it's just like building 150 lineups takes a ton of time. You need to think about every player in the pool, or you're gonna be at risk of having a huge hole. And so, I think it's just tough to have a job and do that. For NFL, it's a little bit easier because you have all week. But I just sort of focused on those 20 and sort of made sure that they were all in tip top.
Great. Okay, so now we'll get into some of these games specifically. So we're gonna start at the beginning of the DraftKings slate and just work our way through. So first up, we have Chicago against Detroit. Mitch Trubisky won the starting job. There are a lot of people still saying that Nick Foles is like the ultimate, like that's where they want to end the season, is with Nick Foles as their quarterback. I think that's ridiculous.
Super Bowl champion Nick Foles.
Yeah, I don't think personally, I don't think that makes any sense. I think that Nick Foles makes more sense as like a motivator for Mitch Trubisky, where he's like a pure contingency plan. I think, why would you want to move on from Mitch Trubisky? Like, obviously he did not play well last year, right? But would you rather have a young quarterback prove themselves during the season, or would you rather have Nick Foles prove himself during the season? If you're the Bears, I think long term, you're probably better off if Mitchell Trubisky turns it around.
Yeah, I think that they're certainly better off if their number one overall pick actually becomes good. I think, to me, it's sort of, it depends on what the Bears, and I don't know what the Bears are. And so I guess just as a caveat, I mentioned this to you before the stream. I am in the very early stages of my week one prep. I was in, I did a FFPC main event team and had my draft yesterday. So I've been in season long mode up until now. And I don't look at anything on defenses for season long because hashtag defenses don't matter. Yeah. And so I'm actually Googling now. But so I think if the Bears defense can get back to where it was, I think they get Eddie Goldman back. I forget the name of their D tackle. I think he opted out. So they sort of have some of their pieces back on defense and some of them not, or suddenly gone. If they can get back to where they were in 2018 on the defensive side of the ball, then I think their view as a franchise might be, we don't have time to wait for Mitch Trubisky to be something. And then maybe it's Foles and maybe he's a Band-Aid and can just not lose games and let the defense be really good. If the defense ends up being more of the 2019 team, then I think you just throw Trubisky. I guess the risk of throwing Trubisky out there is, to the extent he has any trade value, it's might evaporate when he's out there.
Sure.
So yeah, it sort of feels like sort of where the team goes the first 6 weeks will probably dictate, what direction that goes and where the team wants it to go.
Okay, so the Bears are playing the Lions. The money line is Bears plus 115, which is a 47% implied win rate. I don't know what side the rake is on, or if they're splitting the rake or anything like that. I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm just going to give you the numbers that are out there. Detroit is minus 129. That's a 56% implied win rate. The over-under is 43, which I think it probably has something to do with the Bears' long-term identity as being a defensive team. I don't think that it really means much. I don't think that they're going to be the ones dictating the pace of this game. It's probably going to be the Lions, and the spread is 2.5. So let's start with quarterback. We'll just go who would you rather, basically. So Matt Stafford and Mitch Trubisky. Are you considering both of these players for your player pools? And if so, which one do you prefer?
I certainly prefer Stafford. I believe that Kenny Golladay might be doubtful now.
Yeah.
I think I saw last night, which sort of dulls some of the appeal there. On top of that, I'm looking. So last year, Detroit had a pretty. I mean, all teams do, but they have a high, one of the higher pass percentage. Or I'm sorry, not all teams do. All teams have a huge gap between their pass percentage when leading and when ahead. Mm-hmm. Detroit last year threw the ball more when ahead than pretty much every team in the league other than New England and Tampa Bay. So, I think I have more faith in Stafford to keep throwing, get the volume. I don't know what to make of no crowds in NFL and sort of how to factor in home away splits. I would always sort of lean away from passing games on the road, or at least prefer to play passing games at home. Um, so that variable, I don't really know what to make of yet. But on the Chicago side, I think Mitch Trubisky's trash. I'm not going to play Mitch Trubisky probably ever this season unless he suddenly looks like someone who's not Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah. So I guess I am I am kind of the opposite of that. So my thoughts are, I think, um, I do like Stafford. So I'll talk about the home field advantage first. I think that there's no reason to think that there's a huge advantage either way or a lack of an advantage either way without the fans in the stands. The one thing that I've thought of where I don't know if we'll be able to even prove this, but I think the additional stress of having to travel, I think anybody in this state of the world where you're told you're going to have to go on a plane, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. I think that is an additional stress. I don't know. It's not something that we can quantify, and we don't know how it's going to impact different teams. But the additional stress of having to travel and put yourself into that situation, there's no way that could be a positive. So if there's a home field advantage, it might not be felt in the same way where you have the fans creating an unfair amount of noise for one team and not for the other, so that it impacts the offense a lot. But the fact that you have to do like some extra traveling, I think that might be felt more than normal. So I know that like when a West Coast teams travel to the East Coast, like not only are they traveling, not only are they the away team, there's also the physical toll that it puts on your body. So that's kind of something I'm thinking about. In terms of Detroit, they had a much better season last year when Stafford was the quarterback, obviously. And it's interesting that you said that they have like that difference between when they're ahead and when they're behind, how much they're passing. I don't know how to track that before and after Stafford, but I would think that if I'm the Lions and I have these shitty quarterbacks, I'm probably not as secure in my leads when I'm winning. So maybe they felt like they had to keep their foot on the gas and be aggressive because they have like a quarterback they can't really trust. For Mitch Trubisky, I think that for DraftKings specifically, Mitch Trubisky is still a pretty good play because you're going to be able to have a salary saver. You're going to have a lower percent ownership. I think he might actually be more popular this week. I've heard a lot of people talking about him, and there are some good stacking options where you can do Mitch Trubisky plus Allen Robinson, Mitch Trubisky plus Anthony Miller, or Tariq Cohen, or you can have two of them. You can do the bring back. I think that it's definitely an interesting game from that perspective. I do like. I think I probably like Trubisky for this price more than Stafford, due in large part to Galladay not being there. But let's go to the next position. So I'll go first on running back. I think Tariq Cohen was one of my favorite picks in like best ball, because I think if they can successfully salvage Mitch Trubisky, we're gonna see them looking a lot more like the 2018 Bears, where people started believing in them, and Tariq Cohen was a huge part of that. Last year, Nagy misused Trubisky, misused Tariq Cohen, and that's I think where a lot of the upside for the Bears comes in if they perform well. I think David Montgomery, he's dinged up right now, but I'm pretty sure they're saying he's going to be fine for the first game and get a normal amount of snaps, but that could just be a lie. On Detroit side, Kerryon Johnson, Adrian Peterson, DeAndre Swift. I have no idea what they're going to do there, but overall, I think that it's tough to really pick one of those players if it's not Kerryon Johnson on the Lions. What do you think about the running back situation here?
Yeah, I think if you think Detroit's going to win, I think there might be some that Kerryon's not a bad play. He was a guy that I was really high on last season. I took him in the first couple rounds of a few season-long drafts, and that did not go well.
Yeah.
But I think there are a few guys that fall into this category, and he's one of them, who are just like the expectations for them from like still young guys, right? Like not over the hill. The expectations for these guys have fallen off the cliff from last year, and the talent is the same. And so I think for that, it's more probably exploitable in season long to the extent that it's right. With especially, like you said, with the crowded backfield and a 2-point spread, and you don't really know who's good in week one. He could go out there and just get 6 carries and then go on to have a great season. But of all those guys, if I was going to play somebody, it'd probably be him. I'd probably, at this point, assuming Galladay sits, probably would like like Stafford, Marvin Jones, and maybe Stafford, T.J. Hawkinson,
Yeah.
who's another guy who I like this season a lot, to sort of break out a little bit, is probably my favorite plays here.
Okay. So let's go on to wide receiver. We've already kind of touched on the situation here a little bit, so we're not going to spend as much time. You go ahead and you can take wide receiver first.
Yeah. Allen Robinson is a player that I love. I think he's unbelievably talented, and this sort of came up as like during one of his games, and sort of became a little bit of a meme last year. But just like this string of horrible quarterbacks that he's had, going back to high school, basically, it's like Mitchell Trubisky, or not Mitchell, Christian Hackenberg, and then Blake Bortles, and then just like the train wreck down in Jacksonville, and so I just feel bad for the guy. I think you're right. I didn't realize. I just looked at pricing and saw how cheap Trubisky is. And I'm playing, as I said, I'm playing 150 lineups, so entirely possible at that price that I will have some Trubisky stacks in there. But I'm tentative to have any like serious volume on Bears receivers for the same Trubisky reason.
Yeah.
On the Detroit side, if Golladay was playing, I'd love him. I don't know what the injury is, to be honest. Gotcha. Yeah. So even if he plays, I'll probably maybe try to get a lineup or two for leverage, but we'll just be scared of him sort of
reaggregating and not playing. Yeah.
Exactly. Marvin Jones, I also think is very, very good. And I think
popular.
Yeah, he'll probably be chalky if Golladay sits, which lessens the appeal. But I get why he would be chalk if that happens.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting question. So if a player is chalky, right? How do you manage your exposure to that player? Do you try to match the field? Are you someone who will just go out and fade somebody, or is it more like matching the field or overweighting?
So I spent a lot of time last year looking at like full field ownership stuff to try to like figure out like what I thought the right play is there. And where I came out is basically like I don't care about ownership unless it's one of those weeks, like Lat Murray week last week when Kamara was out and Lat Murray was like 60-70% owned.
Yeah.
I think at that point you need to make a decision like, is the guy going to blow up? And if he's not going to blow up, or if you don't think he's going to blow up the way that ownership would suggest, I go for the fade and try to get leverage. But on a week like week one, I think ownership is going to be very spread out relative to other weeks. And so this week I'm just going to play who I like. And I'll probably be spread out for the same reason everybody is, just to like, I think the winning stack last year, I think in week one, if I remember right, was the Terry McLaurin day, when he just went off, and it's like, okay, Terry McLaurin's good apparently. So yeah, in general, I basically if I don't think a guy's going to be over like 40 to 50% owned, then I don't care about chalk. Like I'm going to play who I like. Especially because I'm willing to play, a guy 80-90%. So at that point, you can get leverage on pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
And then on low-owned guys, I'll be a little more tentative. Just like, I don't want to sink half my lineups because I had a little too much faith in a 1%er.
Yeah. Okay. Last up, I don't really feel like we should be talking about defense much because defense a lot of the time isn't a place where you're going to have good reasons to like play a defense other than the opposing quarterback is bad. This offense has been giving up a lot of turnovers. This defense generates a lot of turnovers. Like we just don't know enough about that right now, and I think that it's normally the last place that people think for their lineups anyways. So for tight ends, I'll go first. I think you're right. TJ Hawkinson is a very good option for DraftKings. I think last year was when he kind of went off in week one, right? And he had a really good day.
Yeah, the Arizona game.
And then everybody was chasing it the rest of the season, and it didn't really pay off. There's no reason to think that TJ Hawkinson won't be a good receiving tight end this year in the NFL, but I think tight end is extremely deep right now. in the NFL because a lot of teams like the ability to have a receiving tight end and a blocking tight end, and I think more teams are adopting that because they've identified it as like an actual good strategy that a lot of teams were just overlooking for a while. Jimmy Graham is a little overpriced for what I would want for Jimmy Graham because you're really depending on a touchdown until we know how much his target percentage is going to be. But I know in best ball, he at the end of best ball drafts, he started getting a little bit of hype as somebody who is like a good punt at tight end. So I'm not sure I really want to play T.J. Hawkinson. I think he'll be over owned because of the Galladay news, and it's still only a 43 point over under. So do you like either of these tight ends? Like, do you think you'll end up on them very much?
I'll probably have a little bit of, like I said, a little bit of Hawkinson. Although I agree, I think I'll probably own more of him if Galladay is out, but will like the play more if Galladay plays.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just from a leverage standpoint, less attention. You'll have more sort of focus from the Bears safeties on the secondary, which might free some stuff up for Hawkinson down the seam and over the middle. Jimmy Graham, like I get it. When you're that big and have that track record, he's always going to be a red zone threat. So especially like you said, at the end of best ball drafts, like there aren't many guys left on the board in round 18 that could have a 2 touchdown game, and Jimmy Graham could. And so I get that. Detroit's defense wasn't great 2 years ago. They looked a lot better last year, but they lost Darius Slay. And so, to your point, just don't really know what to make of them. I doubt I'll play much Jimmy Graham this week, just because he's old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to play guys that are my age in DFS. Usually doesn't work out well.
So I'll give my final thoughts and then we can move on to the next game. So Chicago against Detroit, I think both of these teams are undervalued from a season-long perspective. Nobody's really giving them chances to win their division and make an impact in the playoffs. But I think that both teams do have a realistic chance of making the playoffs and being good this season. Chicago's defense will probably still end up being good. Mitchell Trubisky is at the lowest public perception that he will probably ever be, unless he loses his job. In terms of DraftKings ownership, there will probably be a lot more ownership on this game than there should be because everybody's talking about Trubisky right now. So he should be like a 2% play, but he'll probably end up being like a 5 or 6% play. And then I love the Lions for season long, like win total and for chances to win the Super Bowl. I like Matt Patricia a lot. He's another person who the public consensus, they all hate him just because he's annoying, and I totally get it. He is very annoying. But they've made a lot of upgrades on defense, and I think that when we look back at the beginning of the season and think about what teams we were completely wrong about, I think the Lions are going to be one of those teams. In regards to the spread, it's a 2.5-point spread. I think the public is going to be on Chicago, so I like Detroit a lot. I think that if I was going to make a bet on this game, it would be for Detroit. So before we move on to the next game, are there any players from this game that you think might fit into the almost perfect lineup?
No.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's fine. We can just go next. So next up we have Miami and New England. Miami is another
You know
team.
what?
Okay.
I mean, just to finish the dunk contest on Mitchell Trubisky, the Lions D at 2,700 is intriguing to me.
Okay, sure. That is the kind of quarterback that you might want to look at. So we do have some information about Mitch, where maybe that is a spot that you can exploit. So next up we have Miami against New England. Miami is another team that has been getting a little bit of hype around the NFL as being a team that should outperform like expectations. But I think at this point the public perception is correct. Like they're not thought of as a 2-14 or 3-13 team. I think they'll be thought of as somewhat competitive because Tom Brady has left the division. But I think going from Tom Brady to Cam Newton doesn't really matter that much in terms of how it should impact win totals unless Cam Newton is still injured. So for this game, we have Miami at plus 260. That's a 28% implied win rate. New England is minus 305, which is 75%. Obviously, the value's on Miami. If I was going to make a bet on this game, I'd probably just bet on Miami to win outright. The spread's 7 points, which is Obviously, it's a good number. Like whenever you get to around 7, it's pretty easy to pick the underdogs. And the over/under is 41.5. So we'll start at quarterback. I love Cam Newton for best ball. I love Cam Newton in general. I just love Cam Newton. Like I was telling my like my dad the other day that I love Cam Newton. I think the Patriots are going to destroy everybody, and he said, "Oh, he'll probably just get hurt." And I think that's like the public perception of Cam is that he's just going to get hurt again. So I'm going to go against that all year long. I don't know if I'm going to like him from a DraftKings perspective because I've heard that his ownership is expected to be around 10%, which is a lot higher than it probably should be in this matchup at 41.5. So if it's going to be 10%, he really needs to have some running upside to kill you, where he gets one of these ceiling games, and it's definitely possible. But I think I'll stay off of Cam Newton as one of my core plays for that reason. Ryan Fitzpatrick's hilarious. If you're going to have Devonte Parker exposure, you might just want to have one lineup with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I will probably avoid both of these guys for the almost perfect lineup.
Yeah. So after disagreeing about everything on the first game, we are in lockstep here. Cam is so I have 8 season-long teams this year, and I have Cam on 5 of them.
I have so much Cam Newton in best ball. It's a problem.
Yeah, I think he's when you get to that 10-11 round. So my first humble brag, I was all over Lamar Jackson last year and just had him everywhere. And I think that, like, I'm not saying Cam's going to be Lamar. He's not going to run like that, et cetera. But like, the reason I love Lamar was because in round 10, I was like, this guy could be a league winner. And I feel that way about Cam this year. Even if the Patriots just use him as like, 70% of what Carolina did in terms of the red zone, that's all you need are the touchdowns, the 1-yard plunges. And I think for me, I think that the Patriots are more Belichick than Brady. And I think, Josh McDaniels was Sean McVay before Sean McVay came around in terms of his perception as, boy wonder among offensive coordinators. So I think every year for however long the narrative was, if Cam can just be a little more accurate, if Cam can be, make a few better decisions. Now I think, it's the same story, but there's a more compelling reason to believe it. I think there's no reason to believe he's not healthy until we see it. So love Cam for season long. And I will probably have a decent amount of him. What I'm looking at now has him at 6% owned, which would be the number 6 quarterback on the slate. But for me, it's more of a price play. If we're right about Cam, this is the cheapest he's going to be all season.
Yeah.
And so I think you can play him naked. I don't think you necessarily need to stack him with anyone. And so Cam at 61, I like a lot.
Okay. So
and Fitz I would play. I think you can always play Fitz. I won't have a ton of them, but YOLO.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, so like that's the kind of player where I don't 150 max a lot. I did a little bit with mini maxes last year, but it's just not my style. Like, I just don't love having to build 150 because I don't trust I don't know how to use most optimizers well enough for NFL to get the teams that I want. But if
it's a skill set in and of itself is like knowing how to use your optimizer. Yeah.
So I do like going through if I'm going to build 20 or 30 lineups by hand, I will try to get exposure to a lot of different stacks. And that links like the wide receivers together with the quarterbacks a lot. Like the exposure is kind of tied together, so that's not always great. But I always end up being in that situation, so it's like an all or nothing kind of thing. But let's go to running back. So running back for Miami, we have Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. I think these. Yeah,
I guess just to pause there. So I mentioned earlier, like roster construction is something that I focus on a lot for football. I think you are right about that. I think one thing that people do in football is try to get too cute with their stacks. Like you don't need to be stacking up 7 guys from the same game, or like, you don't need to have 2 receivers and run it back with 2 more guys and hope that the game is 54-48. Like that doesn't happen that often. Last year, looking at the top 25 lineups in the Millie Maker for every week, the most common stack that won was quarterback, wide receiver, and one player from the other team. The next most popular was quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 1 player from the other team. Next was quarterback, wide receiver, tight end opponent. So I think I guess my point there is don't game stack, but always like you want to have that wide receiver tie.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science, right? But so yeah, I get that knock on Cam. But I think, and so I guess naked lineups were 9%. But I think we're overwhelmingly like Lamar, Josh Allen. So I trust Cam for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. So for running backs, in Miami, I think that Miami is a spot that I consider like a dumbfounding spot. There's so much information and so many possibilities about how the backfield could shake out that everyone's kind of staying away from them. I think Miami's running backs are probably in best ball going to be something that everybody missed out on because one of them will probably be a top 24 running back for DraftKings purposes when we look back for the entire season. So Jordan Howard, I know he's more of a generic, more of a traditional running back where he's not great out of the backfield. Matt Breida can kind of do both, but neither are amazing pass catching backs. I think like everybody assumes Matt Breida is a smaller running back. He must be great at pass catching, but I don't think the numbers show that. I think that's kind of a misperception of Matt Breida. So I don't love either at 5,000, and hopefully they have a couple weeks that are not very good, and we can get on them at lower numbers. In terms of New England, I'm all about Sony Michel for season long and best ball. I think that he is really like misunderstood by the public again because again it's a Patriot situation. There are so many running backs. Everybody could theoretically touch the ball, and everybody's afraid that their running back is going to get screwed by Bill Belichick. I also like James White a lot, and James White we've seen have a ton of success on DraftKings. He is the pass catching back. I'm sure that some people are saying, Christian McCaffrey, when he had Cam Newton, he was the best running back in the NFL. So I'm sure we'll get some takes like that, even though a lot of the season Cam Newton wasn't involved, just from like the lazy kind of thinking. But I'm not afraid of James White. I don't think that he's worth 6,000 though, so this is probably a stay away from a price perspective. I think if Sony Michel got 20 carries tomorrow against Miami and New England wins, just like dominating Miami, that's probably the easiest way to do it, as opposed to like throwing to James White and stuff like that. So these are going to be more under-owned plays. Again, I don't love any of the running back plays here. Is there anything you like here?
Not really. I think you summed it up. Is it just in both places there's too many mouths to feed, and you don't know which one is going to really get there. And I try not to do the Kremlinology stuff with camp reports. I think that it can just lead you astray more than it puts you on the right path. But there's like rumors like, oh, Cam has a great rapport with Rex Burkhead, and I love Rex Burkhead. I think he's a really good player. So you just don't know. I think Michelle is if he's healthy the most talented guy in that backfield. So totally get that. Just week to week, I don't know what to make of it. So I probably won't roster much of any of these guys. The White play intrigues me, and it sort of comes back to what Cam is in this offense. If James White is going to be anything close to what he was with Brady, Cam needs to be much more accurate on short stuff than he was with Carolina. I think that McCaffrey, we've seen him sort of I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't even know how to make that comparison. Like, not to dismiss what you said, but like I was trying to go there in my own head and just don't even know how to, if that's a relevant, data point.
Yeah.
But if, so I guess just coming back to the main point, but if Cam can do that, if Cam still has the threat of being able to run and put a little pressure, even if it's just a couple times a game, makes life on your running backs easier. So I could see, White being even, just as effective, but I could also just see him being nothing without, that quarterback to sort of hit him in stride.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's because we have these moving pieces. We have a lot of question marks that there's going to be depressed ownership on a lot of these players. So let's just go to wide receiver. Devonte Parker is pretty popular. Everyone's pointing to Week 17, saying Devonte Parker had a great game against the Patriots last season. I'm pretty sure Preston Williams was not in that game, so they were kind of forced to target Devonte Parker more often than they would normally. I am not playing Devonte Parker against the Patriots at 6,000 against Stephon Gilmore. That's just not what I'm going to do. If it beats me, it beats me. I don't really care. I would be more likely to play Preston Williams than Devonte Parker here because if I'm Bill Belichick, I would probably just try to take away the best wide receiver on the other team. For the Patriots, I think Julian Edelman will be more popular than he probably should be. I don't love any of the wide receivers because I don't know enough about how New England's going to use everything. So like I said, there are too many unknowns, and that's why they will be low owned. If you have a good take, meaning like the proverbial you, like anybody who's watching this video, if you feel really good about a play with the Patriots, then you should go for it because nobody's really going to feel comfortable doing it. And I'll touch on the tight ends real quick, and then I'll kick it over to you. So again, New England, we don't know who they're going to use as their primary tight end, but tight end correlation is extremely high with quarterbacks. So if you are going to play Cam and don't love any of the wide receiver options, you could try to play Asiasi or whoever else might play, like Ryan Izzo, I think, was supposed to be one of the two main options, but I have no idea. And then Mike Gosicki is another player who was underwhelming last year. He's priced up as though we know he's going to be pretty good because people want him to be good. So he's not even a price play yet. So I don't love a lot of these plays in this game. Like, I think season long, there's spots that I will eventually want to return to once their prices come down or ownership stays low. But for week one, with all the uncertainty, I just probably won't end up there because I'm a chicken.
Yeah. On the Miami side, I agree completely. I'm not messing with Steph Gilmore. And if people want to own Devonte Parker and let me sort of fade him, then more power to him. Gosicki, I agree. I think he's too expensive, but I like the talent. If the Patriots are able to do their usual thing and sort of shut down those outside guys, he might get some targets funneled to him. And, if he trusts the Patriots to win, I think to your point earlier, I didn't really say much about the Miami backs, but agree. I think that they're not great DraftKings plays because of the lack of pass catching upside, which, if you get into a late game Miami down situation, might be, just sort of dump downs to Gosicki and Patrick Laird. So I get it. I probably won't have a ton of it, but I think it's all right. On the New England side, I agree again. I think Edelman is very much the same story as James White in terms of, what he will be with Cam. Sort of comes down to, can Cam improve his accuracy a little bit? Mm-hmm. The guy I want to take a few flyers on here, although there might be ownership, is N'Keal Harry, because I thought that at least the reports I saw last year about him were very, very negative. Just people sort of doubting whether he was ever going to be able to be anything in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But I think his main skill is, catches in traffic. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they use him in the red zone this year. And if, he's sort of put in the work and sort of improve those things, in being in the New England locker room for a year, with that staff, I think can improve any player. So yeah. So I and the investment's there, right? So they obviously, sort of are hoping he turns out. So I want to get to N'Keal Harry shares, but the tight ends, I like the idea. I'm not a ton of it, but you could get Cam and Izzo or Cam and Asiasi for super cheap and then load up elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that all makes a lot of sense. In terms of almost perfect lineup, I want Cam to work, but I'm not going to trick myself into playing Cam in the almost perfect lineup just because I want it to happen. So this is another game I'm probably not playing many players from, just not my style.
I think Cam is on the list. There are a few other guys that I probably intrigued by more here. But
We can put him in the player pool, and then we'll have to make this decision later.
yeah,
Should we
yeah,
get
yeah.
N'Keal Harry involved?
That would probably be where I go with it. I'm less sold on him. It's more of just like if I'm going to play Cam, that's who I would take with him.
Yeah.
And then I actually don't know his price offhand. So he's
4,500?
4,400.
Yeah, 4,400.
Yeah. And he's what I'm looking at has him at 3% owned. So if that's accurate, then it gives you. And actually, I did not realize that they'd sent Demary Bird. So he's another guy that I would throw in there as a flyer. Yeah. Probably not a perfect lineup guy, but yeah, I would say Cam and then N'Keal Harry just for placeholder.
Okay. So before we move on, in terms of ways to approach the game from a traditional betting side, I think that Miami is going to get talked up as a team that has a chance to beat the Patriots because they have one of their ex-coaches, and people love saying like, oh, Bill Belichick against his disciples, like look what Matt Patricia did when they beat the Patriots last year, blah, blah, blah. This is a fundamentally different Patriots team without Tom Brady, and I'm not betting against Bill Belichick in Week 1. I think this is probably the worst chance for Miami to beat the Patriots because there are so many things that are different from when Brian Flores was involved with the team. So I'll let everybody think that's a good play when it's really not. I don't want to bet it at -7. If it can come down to -6.5 or -6, I'd be completely fine with it. I think most of the time the Patriots win by more than that. So let's go to Philadelphia against Washington. Are you an Eagles fan?
I am an Eagles fan.
Oh my God, this is gonna be a long season. All right, so it's Philadelphia road favorites -245 against the Washington team without a name. Do you know that song, like the horse with no name or whatever? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like I couldn't tell you the artist,
Like
but I'm aware of the song.
on a horse with no name, like whatever that is. I'm pretty sure that I will make a song about the Washington no-name football team at some point this season, especially if they beat the Eagles. That'd be amazing. So the money line, Eagles -245 as road favorites. Washington's +210. That's 71-30. So 70-30 basically. The over-under is 42.5, which I think is low. So I would probably look at the over in this one. And then the spread is 5.5. I don't like it enough to bet on that. But I do think Washington is a live dog. Everybody's on Philadelphia. And I think that's really when you should be afraid. So let's start at quarterback. What do you think about Carson Wentz and Dwayne Haskins?
So Wentz, like, I don't know. I don't love him. Like in general, he has had the flashes where he looks like a star, and then I think more often than not is underwhelmed me. I worry about their his options a little bit this year. Ertz is good, but I mean he's sort of like getting into Jason Witten territory a little bit of just sort of like run 9 yards, catch it, and fall down.
Mm-hmm.
So unless he's getting super high volume, not the best DFS play necessarily, but he has traditionally just roasted the Redskins. So there's a new with Ron Rivera in town, it's a new defensive scheme, so you don't know if that was scheme related or something else or personnel related or whatever it might be. But so there's that. But I think Rieger probably won't play. So I will probably get some Wentz and Deshaun Jackson, just because Deshaun Jackson is still super fast by all indications.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I probably will not have the ownership of this passing game that the spread might sort of dictate for the field.
Yeah. So I think it's funny, like Dwayne Haskins, I know that people didn't like him last year in regards to how he played, but when we were going from like the draft into the season, one of my friends pays a lot of attention to the NFL draft and is a very knowledgeable person in general. And his read on Dwayne Haskins was that Dwayne Haskins is extremely intelligent in terms of like undervalued by the public, in terms of his intelligence, and he thinks that he has really good long-term prospects for being able to be a successful quarterback in the NFL for a long time. So I think I'm like I have to have a high opinion of Dwayne Haskins until he loses his job forever. So I do like Dwayne Haskins as a potential play at 5,000, especially if you believe in the talent of Terry McLaurin. I don't know what the Eagles did to remedy their secondary, but they lost Malcolm Jenkins. I don't know if, like, as somebody who is not an Eagles fan, I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have, but as an outside, as like a lay person in terms of the Eagles, I would have to think that that's a big loss. So I do like Dwayne Haskins here, and I do like Terry McLaurin a lot. But let's go to running back. Also, Carson Wentz.
Yeah. I guess I'll just add on. So I still don't trust the Eagles secondary to be great. But they brought in Darius Slay. So
Okay, sure. But he had a bad year last year, right?
He did, but I think he's like 28. And it was more of like a bad year by Darius Slay standards.
Sure, okay.
Or it was 29. But so I don't think there is like there's sort of data that suggests there is sort of like a running back like cliff for some corners when they get to 30. Other ones, like Terrence Newman's 50 now or whatever, and still shutting people down in the slot. But so I think that for the Eagles, Jenkins' role last year was, I think they could miss him more in the running game and shutting down other teams' tight ends. He was played sort of the way like that, the Kansas City uses Tyrann Mathieu, and like a guy like that, like a poor man's I forget everybody's name now, Jamal Adams and stuff, where he was at the line of scrimmage a lot. He was supporting the run game. He was sort of a do everything, maybe playing a little bit of outside linebacker type position in a nickel. Yeah. I don't know who they have to do that anymore. They are playing Jalen Mills now at safety, which I think is probably a better fit for him. But he, the Jalen Mills big thing, he gets toasted, yeah. Right? But he can tackle and
he does get toasted.
And so, so putting him on the island on a sort of outside receiver is where that risk where like the risk there is much higher of it just being a touchdown if he fucks up, yeah, or if he messes up. Sorry.
Doesn't matter.
So I think I will. So I didn't make a comment. So I will have some of Haskins and McLaurin. I like them. For all the reasons you said, both season wise and this week. But Slay is there, so I think it's not sort of hopefully not the dumpster fire it was last year.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you made about Jalen Mills, because obviously my first reaction is that guy gets boom roasted all the time, but it's just thinking about it from like not obviously, but I never played football in like a team environment outside of like pickup football. But thinking about myself, I was always very good at playing safety in pickup games because I can kind of figure out where the ball's going to go and can like make it look like I'm not paying attention, but then actually just like get a pick or something like that. And I was horrible at man coverage. So maybe Jalen Mills is just like Peichel in terms of being a defensive back. Maybe he just can't cover somebody one-on-one, but if you put him into a ball hawk role, he can like utilize his talents better. I think that could actually be a big thing for them. Hopefully that's not true. I'm a Giants fan, so.
The team seems to think it, to like it. This is another one where like the preseason games, it probably would have drawn the wrong conclusion, but would have been interesting to see how it worked out.
Yeah.
But he'll also, so he's basically playing the Malcolm Jenkins role. So he'll be at the line of scrimmage a lot. Like they want him to be aggressive.
Okay.
So hopefully, to your point that they found a good way to channel that aggressiveness, and he'll sort of have, other guys over the top if so it's not 7 if he misses.
Yeah. So okay, in terms of running backs, I don't know the Miles Sanders situation with his injury. I'm not a huge Boston Scott fan. I think a lot of season-long and best ball players have been trying to convince themselves that Boston Scott's going to be very good. I would watch out for that. I'm not in love with that. And also Antonio Gibson is projected to be one of the highest-owned players on this slate. I think I have Antonio Gibson in like a dynasty league, and I hope Antonio Gibson plays well long term. But there are so many assumptions about this player. I don't know why everyone is just like all in on him already. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So these aren't my favorite running back plays, and it'll probably be a spot that I try to be different in regards to who I'm playing at running back. So have you listened to a lot of the buzz on Gibson and stuff like that?
Yes. He is definitely, I think probably Gibson, Henry Ruggs, and can't think of a third, would be like, my top 3 guys most mentioned in my Twitter feed by, all of the thousands of draft gurus that I follow over the past, or wannabe draft gurus, I should say, over, on Twitter. So, yeah, I have him on a lot of season-long teams. I think just for a PPR format, it's a great fit. Even if he is, a 75% of expectations, I think that there's strong value there, especially if Washington isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
This week, the uncertainty and the ownership have me a little off of it. And again, if you think, as it seems like we both do, that the Eagles are probably a little overvalued here from a Vegas perspective, a lot of the Gibson ownership might be coming from folks that are like running back a Wentz stack or something. And so I don't know if, I'm not going to have as much of that. So I think I'll have less, Gibson on the comeback.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that you should do this in every single lineup you make. But if you want to be the ultimate troll, what you should do is build a lineup, right, with Antonio Gibson. Then you get rid of Antonio Gibson and you plug in J.D. McKissic. So when everybody is freaking out about how much J.D. McKissic is playing, you can just have your lineup shoot to the top of the leaderboard. That's what I would do because I'm a bad person. So let's look at.
I think that's a good play.
Yeah, let's look at wide receiver. Especially the way this game script might go. Like, if you think that Philadelphia is actually going to beat the crap out of the Washington team without a name, then J.D. McKissic makes a lot of sense. He is not a great player. He hasn't shown that he's a great. What we should say is he hasn't shown that he's a great player or a huge difference maker when he was on Seattle. But it makes sense. Like he is more of the pass catching back. Antonio Gibson was a wide receiver converted to a running back, so he can obviously do it as well. But that also means that they could probably use both of them at the same time, like on the field at the same time. That's one of the next evolutions of NFL football, is having slot receivers that are also the pass catching back and are more maneuverable. But we'll save that for once I'm proven right about that. That's just a less than 1% play that I can claim I was right about in the future.
Make sure you have me on that podcast because I can tell you about my 2-quarterback offense.
That's some fun stuff right there. So in regards to wide receivers, I think Terry McLaurin's a good play. I think Steven Sims is a good play. Sims played well at the end of last year. There's no reason to think that he won't continue that. In terms of the Eagles, I don't love Deshaun Jackson because of the amount of hype that he's getting. I think that they're saying Rager's going to play now. So I would probably look for pivots off of Deshaun Jackson in large field tournaments. I would consider Rager, but I don't know enough about him. I don't know if he's actually as good as people say he is. In terms of tight ends, I think that the big upside, I think that the narrative for most of the postseason was Philadelphia is going to have injured receivers again. Look at Zach Ertz, look at Dallas Goedert. They're going to get more targets than you think they will. But if Rager's playing, it makes me like the tight ends a little bit less. If one of them scores a touchdown, obviously they have a chance of like backdooring, but I just don't love those plays. For Washington's tight ends, I don't love their tight ends. Logan Thomas is supposedly somebody that there's a lot of hype around right now. I'm not going to fall for that. That's basically all I have for this game. Were there any other thoughts you had about the wide receivers and tight ends?
No, not really. I agree with Sims. If I recall, he's very fast, and I like guys that are very fast. And Jackson, I like from an ownership agnostic standpoint, but agree with your thoughts there. And Rieger, I just watch so much less college football than I used to. I barely have like my own opinions on most of these rookies when they come in, but the people I trust on draft stuff all love Rieger. So I didn't love the pick when they made it. I wanted them to take Chenault or trade up and get one of the Bama receivers, but I've been convinced to sort of jump on the Rieger train, and as the offseason's gone on. So week 1, banged up rookie. My expectations are not high in this game, but I'm expecting him to be something as we go forward.
All right, so this is your last chance to get an Eagle into the almost perfect lineup for week 1. Is there anyone that you're convinced is a very good play and should be considered?
No, I don't think so.
Unlucky.
No one I love.
Unlucky.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put Sims on the list. I think Sims is a good upside play. I'm gonna put J.D. McKissick for the absolute troll value. But that's about it from this game. We're going long, by the way. This is gonna be a very long video, but if it helps you with your lineups and it helps me with my lineups, I don't care how long the video is. But we'll try to be a little bit faster. All right, next up we have Indianapolis and Jacksonville. Indianapolis is minus 435. That's an 81% implied win rate. Jacksonville's plus 360 at 20%. The over-under is 45. The spread is 8.5. So Jacksonville has a gigantic implied team total for this game, which is kind of surprising. Jacksonville, everybody's talking about the mass exodus of defensive talent on this team, so everyone just assumes that they're going to get torched all season long. I don't know if I really buy into that yet. That's probably overblown. But let's start. I'll give my opinions on. Let's try this. I'll give my opinions on Indianapolis. You can go. Then you can give a response. You go Jacksonville. I'll give a response, and we'll try to be a little quicker. But we're not sacrificing good information. If we have good information, we have to give it because the people demand it. Does that sound good? All right. So for Phillip Rivers, I think that Phillip Rivers is not a gigantic upgrade over Jacoby Brissett in terms of how this offense is going to operate. The strength of Jacoby Brissett's arm probably matches up better with T.Y. Hilton than Phillip Rivers. But if Phillip Rivers can orchestrate the offense better and is able to be more of a threat in the intermediate and short range, then it might open things up over the top. But it's not going to be the primary way that they try to operate their offense. I think for running backs, I'm very low on Jonathan Taylor for season long and best ball. I have like almost no shares of him because I thought that the hype was way too high and where he was being drafted was way too high. And now like information is coming out that they still intend on using Marlon Mack as their primary back, and Jonathan Taylor is his backup. And then Nyheim Hines is a player that I absolutely love in DraftKings as of the PPR upside. And with Phillip Rivers, I think that he has a huge ceiling. So I think that the number of times that we see Nyheim Hines being impactful in DraftKings will be at an all-time high this year. For their wide receivers, I don't know anything about Michael Pittman Jr., Zach Pascal, or Paris Campbell, but I love T.Y. Hilton. He is always in my player pool as somebody to consider. And I think he is... Okay, never mind. He's not a pivot off of Deshaun Jackson, but if he was, that'd be even better play. Their tight end, Jack Doyle. Mo Alley Cox is getting some hype, but I'm probably not going to end up on Jack Doyle. I like the upside of some other tight ends that we'll talk about later. So for the Colts, I would say I want exposure to Phillip Rivers in a game stack situation. I would pair him with Nyheim Hines. I would pair him with Marlon Mack. I would pair him with T.Y. Hilton, but I can't get much deeper. I don't understand why I should go deeper in this group of players yet. So maybe I'll regret not having more exposure to them, but that's kind of where I'm at on the Colts right now.
Yeah. So so the Colts. Where's my personnel tab? The Colts last year, when they were ahead, just like shut it down. And so the splits in like snaps and carries and touches for Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines was just like, if the Colts lose, play Naheem Hines. If the Colts win, play Marlon Mack.
Yeah.
And I think the Colts smash here. And so I agree with you on T.Y. Hilton. He's always in play. Certainly, I think I think Jacoby Brissett is underrated, but I think that assuming Phillip Rivers still isn't the guy that, was throwing up ducks to Raiders D-backs in that game last year.
Yeah.
And you can still get him the ball, then I'd probably take Phil Rivers over Jacoby Brissett for one season.
Yeah.
So I think it's a neutral to positive there. Paris Campbell is a guy I think that's super talented. Had a couple flashes last year with really nice plays, but for this passing game, I just feel like if they get ahead, they're gonna sort of tuck it and run, and then it's just is it Mack or is it Taylor? I don't know either, and I think that I think there are a ton of backfields this year. It's more of a season-long thought, but like, other than the top three backs, McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, like, I wanted to wait and take the second guy. Like, I'd rather have Chase Edmonds than Kenyon Drake. I'd rather have, like James Robinson than, whoever for Jacksonville was going earlier.
Like Ozigbo and Raquel Armstead and Chris.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather have Boston Scott than Miles Sanders, not because I think Boston Scott is a great player, but just because if they split carries 2/3, 1/3, you'd rather have the guy you can draft in the 10th round than the guy you draft at the end of the first. And so I put the Colts backfield there. Season long, I'd rather have Mack than Taylor just because he was cheaper in drafts.
Mm-hmm.
But for this week, I think you want one of those guys from the Colts. I don't know which one.
All right, so let's go to the Jags then. What do you think about the Jaguars?
Yeah, the Jags have some interesting pieces to me on offense. I want Gardner Minshew to be good just because he's hilarious as like a character in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm not sort of banking on last year being his bar going forward. So I don't know what the Jacksonville offense is going to look like. I will probably take a few flyers on Laviska Shenault because I like the talent, and hopefully they'll find some ways to use him creatively. There's been some buzz about him getting carries at running back and potentially being used in goal line packages that way. So I think it's like if you're building 20 lineups, maybe you put them on one team type of thing. But otherwise, like, I just don't know. I think the Colts defense will be decent this year. And last year their big thing was, run cover 2, don't let people get big plays on us, tackle the guy in front of you, which you wanted to target with them with sort of your pass catching backs and possession tight ends. So I don't really know who that is on Jacksonville or who I trust to be that, or do I trust Gardner Minshew to be consistently accurate enough, particularly if they're able to get some pressure to make anyone have value in that role. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe a little Shenault, maybe a little James Robinson, but probably not a ton of Jags for me either. And I think, and again, if the Colts do win and do that, then it's going to be a quick game, very few plays, and sort of negative game script for all these guys.
Yeah, so I love the Colts, like, in terms of their chances of winning the Super Bowl. I think this might be a Peyton Manning situation where he just not backs his way into a championship, but like at the end of his career, he's not asked to do everything. They have a lot of talent around him. Their defense is extremely good. like that's really where I think a lot of the upside for this team comes from. But I do like the Jags, and you humble bragged before, so I mean I have to humble brag as well. There's EU Masters going on today, and I went into this satellite, and of course I won the satellite because I'm Pikel.
Of course.
I'm a
Nice.
legend. You heard the song in the beginning of the video. I'm not going to put that song in videos if I'm not a legend, but I am a legend, so I put it in the videos. So for Jacksonville, I love Gardner Minshew. I think that he's priced up a little bit too much. Chris Thompson is one of my favorite real life players. When he was on the Redskins, I think that because of his injuries, people didn't really have enough time to appreciate how good he was as like an all-around weapon. But the fact that he's gone down to Jacksonville with Gruden, I think that Chris Thompson's going to get a lot more action than people think, especially in the beginning of the season. There's probably no player on Jacksonville who understands what he's supposed to do for this offense more than the player who has been with Gruden for 4 years, 5 years. And Chris Thompson was an extremely talented player in college. It's just the injury situation. So if you think, oh, well, this guy is cursed, he's going to get injured again, then fine. Don't pick him in season long. But if you are looking for another pivot off of Antonio Gibson, I think Chris Thompson is a great option. My only concern is that I think there are other people saying that as well. In terms of the wide receivers, I
forgot he was there. I think that's a great play.
I love DJ Chark. I was big on DJ Chark before he broke out last year. But it's funny. He's one of the players that I thought had a really good chance of being very good, but I didn't have enough exposure to him early on to like cash in on the call. Dede Westbrook, I think, is being slept on for season-long reasons, but right now, apparently on the depth chart, he's not really high. So maybe some of his injuries are catching up with him, but I think he was on the wrong side of touchdown luck last year. So I think that Dede Westbrook could be like a second, or what is he, like a third year, fourth year now breakout. Conley and Cole are also supposed to still get a lot of targets. Not a lot of targets. They're going to eat into the target share for this team. So I think people want it to be DJ Chark plus Laviska Shenault. But in reality, I think they have 5 wide receivers that might actually factor in throughout the course of the season. Keelan Cole had some good games last season. Chris Conley is a talented athletic player that got some run throughout the year, but was never really a huge difference maker. But if you told me any one of these players went off on week 1, I wouldn't be shocked, which is why it scares me so much, especially against the Colts. Tyler Eifert coming in, you kind of have to... The only way you can justify playing Tyler Eifert is if he scores a touchdown. So you would have to limit your exposure to the number of times you think he scores a touchdown in this game. So whatever percentage that is, that's what your limit should be for exposure. Do you have any plays? Oh, well, I guess I should take a stand on this now. I think the Laviska Shenault hype is too high because a lot of times when teams get this kind of player that makes a lot of sense as a potential gadget player, I think the use of the gadgets is always over-projected. Like, the amount that these teams actually do it is too low. If the Jags do it, though, I mean, he'd be a very fun play to watch. Is there anybody that you like for the almost perfect lineup from this game?
Chris Thompson is interesting. I think he should be on the list. Ty would, like Ty and Rivers wouldn't be on my list, but it sounds like you like them, and I get it. So if you want to put them on there, that I'm good with that.
I don't love Rivers for DraftKings purposes. Like you said, I think if they get ahead, they could easily just run the game away. So that scares me a lot, and I think there are other high upside plays. So we'll throw them in the pool, but don't.
Yeah. And then I guess I completely agree with you on Shenault. And I think like the best case, I think what you would want to see as like a fantasy owner is them use him sort of like the Panthers used Curtis Samuel as a rookie.
Exactly. That's
that's how you're going to get usage out of him, as opposed to him being like Cordell Patterson or something.
Yeah. We should have mentioned him as well. I love Cordell Patterson, but he never really gets as much usage as he probably should.
Yeah.
But so I
Although
guess
there was a it might have changed since, but at least like a week ago there was like a very clear path to him getting.
Touches, yeah, because of David Montgomery and everything.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good synopsis of this game. So let's move on to Green Bay against Minnesota. The money line, Packers are the away team, plus 120 against Minnesota, minus 135. The over-under is 45. The spread is 2.5. I like the Packers to win this game outright. I think the points, you're not really giving yourself a gigantic edge by taking the 2.5. So if I was going to make a bet, I'd probably just go for the plus 120, but that's not a big enough number that I'm overly enthusiastic about either. In terms of DraftKings plays, do you want to take the Packers or Vikings? Who would you prefer to talk about?
I will talk about the Vikings.
All right, you're up.
Okay. So, I am a well-established Kirk Cousins hater. I don't think he is very good. And I think that Adam Thielen is overrated. I think that Steph Diggs is wildly underrated. I think Steph Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And that losing him is going to very much change the complexion of this offense. Mm-hmm. I think so. I sort of have a friend of a friend who knows the Stefanski family. So I don't know Kevin Stefanski, but I follow him because of that connection. And so I think he's a really sharp guy. I think that he was sort of held back in Minnesota because of Mike Zimmer's attitudes about football. And so Gary Kubiak always has a great running game. So I will just for the past 20 years. So Dalvin Cook is never going to be. I don't know how much the health injury bug tag to Cook is fair or not, but regardless, it's week 1. He's never going to be healthier. So I love Cook. I think they're just going to feed him like crazy. And I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of Irv Smith, just because I think he's going to be on and again, it's sort of similar to Chenault. Do I want him to be on the field more, or is he actually going to be on the field more?
Yeah.
So I'll be, conservative from that perspective. So I'll have probably a decent amount of Cook, a little bit of Irv Smith, and maybe a little bit of Olabisi Johnson as a salary saver, but we'll be avoiding the big pieces of the Minnesota passing game.
All right. So before we move on to the Packers, I will say that Adam Thielen single-handedly won me a championship when he went off against the Packers. So I was playing against my cousin in the finals of a league with a ton of people from Philadelphia, and I knew my cousin needed a tight end. I didn't play. It wasn't against my cousin. It was against the guy who runs the league, and he needed a wide receiver. And Adam Thielen was by far the best option that was on the waiver wire. So I picked up Adam Thielen so that he couldn't have him, and then I started him against him, and he scored 50 something points. It was I won 220 to 100. Everybody that I played that week went off out of control. It was he still yells at me about that every time that we have a draft and stuff. So
that's great.
For the Vikings, I do like Adam Thielen for the number of targets he might get this year. Justin Jefferson is somebody that I was drafting a lot in best ball early on, and then Olabisi Johnson is apparently the number 2 wide receiver. People make the connection between Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs being very talented young wide receivers that weren't given enough opportunity because they were the younger player, and Mike Zimmer is a backwards thinking person in general, apparently. So I think that at 6,700, I don't love him a lot, but it's kind of whatever. I think the Packers defense is probably underrated right now. But I think everything that you said was pretty accurate. So
yeah, I agree. I agree on the Packers defense. I think they are good. And again, it would be, I'd probably be I hadn't thought about what you said about the travel and stuff. Maybe this one is probably less so. I don't know if they could probably bus from Green Bay to Minnesota or whatever. But I mean, they're probably flying charter at this point. It's so far out of my depth. But I still feel I guess so. I guess adding in, you have a defense going on the road, but and so they're traveling, but they don't have the crowd noise, and so might further away on the Minnesota offense from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that for Green Bay, there is no reason, in my opinion, to think that Aaron Rodgers is a worse real life quarterback. I know a lot of people have said for the past 4 to 5 seasons he hasn't been as good in fantasy as people kind of think of because of the name of Aaron Rodgers. But I'm more interested in how good he is as a real life quarterback and the amount that he impacts how the game is going to turn out. So if the public consensus is right, or actually I guess that's the sharp side perspective is that Aaron Rodgers isn't as good as what everybody thinks. So if they are right, then it should depress both sides of this game. But at 6,300, I think you can kind of justify playing him. The fear is that Dewante Adams is so extremely highly owned that he's going to kind of bring up Aaron Rodgers' ownership. Aaron Jones, 6,900. I don't love that against the Vikings, but the Vikings defense should be worse than it was last year. A.J. Dillon, I don't know what to do with A.J. Dillon. I'm not going to play him until he starts stealing a lot of touches. Lazard is interesting as a leverage play off of Devonte Adams. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is an interesting player for that player who's like 4 receptions for 100 yards and a touchdown. Like that's kind of how I think you can justify playing somebody like MVS. Tight ends, I'm not touching the tight ends from the Packers. So for me, it's really maybe Aaron Rodgers with 1 or 2 receivers to get leverage off of Devonte Adams. But I could also see myself just fading the game entirely. I don't have a good feeling for either of these teams right now.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm also not convinced that Jamal Williams won't continue to be a factor in the backfield, especially early on. So it just like I feel like it's 3 years in a row that we go into the season assuming Aaron Jones is a bell cow, and then he kind of isn't, and just has big games when he gets the touchdowns and the touches.
Yeah.
So agree with that.
Wait, did you look at your DraftKings recently? You came in first place like 3 times for the EU Masters, I think.
Yeah, like I was saying before, I couldn't get like my fantasy cruncher was all messed up when I was trying to get my lineups in, so I had I basically duped all my lineups. This one I duped twice apparently. So it's a good one to do.
3 times. You have the same lineup 3 times in first place. It was a huge chop, but like.
Yeah.
If you're gonna chop, that's the way to do it.
I honestly pulled it up like as you were talking and saw that. It was what made me smile earlier. So good times. Shout out to Mouse Esports. And us.
Look at us. So are there any plays from this game that you think make sense in an almost perfect lineup?
I think go back to pricing here. A super loud motorcycle goes by my house. So, Dalvin Cook is the second most expensive running back. I mean, he'll be on my list just because of the volume, and if I have enough room to fit him, like I'm not going to go out of my way to fit Dalvin Cook in there, but if I have 79, week 1, I think there's always a ton of value, and I'm sure there will be lineups where I have 7,900 to spend on a running back, and if that's the case, then I don't see any other running backs here that I trust more than Dalvin Cook if you get rid of prices.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense.
And on the Green Bay side, I don't know what the story is with Minnesota's secondary. I haven't seen what changes happened there. But Devonte Adams is always in play. I would lean towards Lazard. Again, trying to read tea leaves is dangerous, but supposedly has a good rapport with Rodgers, and he is a guy that just funnels targets to people historically. So, I think if that's right, then that's the guy. On the flip side, I probably won't have any MBS. He was a guy that I really liked last year. just because of the home run potential, and I had him in a lot of best balls, and just the volume wasn't there. I don't have it in front of me, but like he had maybe like 2 or 3 games last year where he had more than 2 or 3 targets, and so like I wouldn't mind putting him on a lineup to make it fit, or like if you want to really stack up the Packers and have like Rodgers, Adams, MVS. I don't think that's I think you could do that pretty much every week, but I think he's a really risky play.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So I just looked at the game log from last year, and out of the 20 games that are in his game log, he hit twice for over 20 points. So I would say if you want to make one lineup with MVS, you should just expect that it hits 1 out of 10 times, but probably less than that, right?
Yeah,
and
I mean, like football in general, right? It's just like something I have to I try to constantly remind myself, and it's obvious, but I think it's important to contextualize DFS stats in particular. Is you get like a full season's worth of like a full season's worth of slates in the NFL is 2 weeks in basketball. It's 2 weeks in baseball.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know if you ever get to your long run value in NFL DFS, because I just don't think there are enough slates for that to happen.
Sure.
Which I think just goes to your point, like 10%. I think you got to put a huge, margin of error on that. But yeah, like it's a low probability event of him hitting. But if he does, it's he could win you the week.
Yeah. All right, that's pretty good. So let's go to the next game, which is Seattle against Atlanta. This is going to be a very popular game for DraftKings. A lot of people are looking at this because there are a lot of attractive season-long and best ball names. So, like, obviously that's going to attract ownership. We have Seattle as a road favorite, minus 145 at 60%. Atlanta is plus 125, 44%. The over-under is 47.5, and the spread... Wait, did I have that wrong? The over-under is 49, and the spread is 3. So, again, we'll do one team each. Who is your preference, Seattle or Atlanta? And I'll go first.
If I get to pick, I will take Seattle.
All right, so I'll take Atlanta. I think that Matt Ryan at 6,700 is way too high. I don't like that at all. At last season, we saw him around 6,000 a lot. So I'm probably not going to Matt Ryan. I think it makes a lot of sense, but you're not even getting him at low ownership. So it's a bad price, bad ownership. Why would I want to play him? Like, obviously there's a chance that he is the number 1 quarterback on the slate, but it's like he will need to crush to kill you in a lot of these tournaments. Todd Gurley, I think, is a very interesting play for week 1. I like Todd Gurley at 6,100. I know that it's the scary thing is like, what if he only gets half of the touches? If he only gets half of the touches, he's Todd Gurley. He's still one of the best running backs in the NFL talent-wise. It's just everybody's afraid because of injury reasons. That's the kind of thing you need to take advantage of in DFS, not run away from. I don't know enough to want to play one of their backup running backs. Julio Jones.
I'm not a big narrative street guy, but like just for me personally, like to sort of your point, like the human element here, like Todd Gurley went to Georgia. I'm pretty sure he grew up in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like playing your first game for the team you rooted for as a child is like a huge deal. Like he gets to play in the Georgia Dome, or like whatever the Mercedes-Benz Dome, whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
So like if you're going to play Todd Gurley, I think this is like I agree. I'd like to do it this week.
Yeah, I think if based off of what you're saying, I think 3 months from now, when we're looking back at the beginning of the season and the Falcons are like 8-3, Todd Gurley's destroying people, their defense somehow figures it out because they've been very injured recently. I thought that they were a very good play last year for like odds to win the Super Bowl. I think they were 36-1 to start the season or something. They were one of the teams that I was high on, as well as the Ravens. I had a pretty good year last year for like NFL futures, but they didn't hit because the Chiefs screwed me. And well, the 49ers really screwed me. I had the 49ers at like 44-1. But for Julio Jones, he's always in play. 7,700. I think it's a good price. He should be a lot closer to Michael Thomas. I'm not afraid of the Seattle defense, even though they probably are good enough to contain most wide receivers. You're not going to stop Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley at 6,100. Horrible price in my opinion. It makes sense because everybody's talking him up for season long and for best ball. But Calvin Ridley, I think, is more of like a 5,000 to 5,500 wide receiver. So he is in a spot where a lot of people are going to play him. So they anticipated that. They put him at 6,100. I don't know anything about the other receivers on that team to where I want to have them. Hayden Hurst at 4,300. Compared to a lot of the prices that we've seen for tight ends, I think that one makes a lot of sense. But like you were saying earlier, Jamal Adams is now on the Seahawks, so it'll probably be a negative matchup. Like the OPRK, the offensive. What is OPRK? Offensive player ranking, or the opponent player ranking, power ranking.
That's probably what it is. Yeah. I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, but it's how good the other team is at stopping the position, right?
Yeah. So this number is looking at statistics from last season and does not take roster changes into consideration. It's not even a projection. It's just like last year's stats. So I think with Jamal Adams, maybe they're much better at covering tight ends. So I guess that means I do want exposure to Todd Gurley, Julio Jones, but they're going to be over-owned. Okay. I think Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Hayden Hurst will probably be over-owned. I think Todd Gurley will be appropriately owned. So that's probably the only spot that I really want to go to, unless I'm game stacking. But I think that the game stack is going to be over-owned as well, so I probably won't even go there. So what are your thoughts on Atlanta? And then give us what you think about the Seahawks.
Yeah, so I thought all of that was sharp. I agree with a lot of it. I think that everyone is sort of bored of drafting Julio Jones, and like he gets all like Julio Jones doesn't score touchdowns narrative. Which like he's averaged 7 touchdowns a year for the past 4 years.
Don't come at us with real statistics.
Along with and like touchdowns are unpredictable, but he's averaged 1,400 yards. But like I just did it's sort of like those years when like Michael Jordan was at his peak and they like gave the MVP to Karl Malone because everyone was bored giving it to Michael Jordan all the time. I feel like that's sort of like the Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones situation. Like Calvin Ridley's good, so is Karl Malone, but he's not Julio Jones. So you can always play Julio Jones. I have a ton of them in season long because I thought it was just like absurd that he would drop to the end of second round sometimes. Mm-hmm. Gurley, I'm scared like season long for him. I just don't trust the health at this point. Just given some of the reports about like the knees, it just it's not like he broke a leg or tore a ligament and then you come back. It's like it seems degenerative. So I think there's risk there. He doesn't sort of do it all season, but if he's going to do it, it's this week. And Russell Gage is interesting. As a third receiver, he's had a couple of good games. If the Seahawks, they run that cover 3, so they sort of take away the over the top stuff, which might give you some opportunities underneath. Same thing for Hurst. He was a guy that I loved as a rookie. I drafted him everywhere, and then he played like 1 snap, and so that wasn't great.
Just came out of nowhere. And really
exactly. But I still like the talent. Super talented athlete. He was like a high level pitcher for some MLB team as well. So I wish the hype wasn't as high so that he was a little bit more sneaky. And I agree with what you said on the Seahawks defense. I was surprised and disappointed they cut Shaquem Griffin because I felt like with like him and Adams that they are like moving towards this almost positionless defense and just have like a ton of guys that are super athletic, kind of big, and can just like screw up your day. You put them anywhere. So I love the Seahawks defense from a season long perspective, even though I think the Atlanta offense will be good. Also agree with what you said about the Atlanta defense. They came on really strong at the end of last year after being terrible for the first 10 weeks or so. But and with the Seahawks, I guess I'll caveat this at the beginning. I wrote like a weekly recap article every week for Roto Grinders last year, like a blog post. And like the theme through the entire season was I got the Seahawks wrong every single week. I would load up on them and they would score, they'd win 10-7 and Russ would throw the ball 15 times. And then I'd fade them and that'd be the week that Russ throws for 4 and runs for 2. Mm-hmm. So with that caveat and the ownership risk, like I want to be in if there's truth to the reports that they're going to let Russ go off this year finally. I want to be in on that on week 1 in a dome where conditions are perfect and he just goes off. So I will have a bunch of Seattle stacks. I think the guy I want to mix in there a little bit to differentiate will probably be Will Dissly. It sounds like he will be healthy for week 1. I need to sharpen the pencil on that overnight. But he crushed for those couple of weeks last year. It's less than a year off of an Achilles. So I think that the report is even if he plays, it'll be part-time. But I think he's a guy that if Russ and Lockett and Metcalf are all as highly owned as expected, and if you want to bring it back with Ridley or Jones, swapping Dissly in for one of those receivers is potentially a way to make yourself different.
All right, so for two things. So before I start talking about Seattle, Atlanta is another team that I think their coach is Dan Quinn, right? He is a very good defensive coach. They are moving towards a positionless defense. That's why they had people like Vic Beasley and their safety who keeps getting hurt. I forget what his name is, but they see that future, and they have these hyper athletic players. And I absolutely love the Falcons defense for that reason. It's just they haven't been able to put it together in one season because of injuries, which is pretty unfortunate. But they're a very good organization in that regard. The let Russ cook thing on Twitter is funny. I love Russell Wilson. I have a Russell Wilson jersey, even though I'm not a Seahawks fan. I hope he does, but it's whatever. In regards to the backfield, I think Carlos Hyde is going to ruin people's entire years.
Keenan Neal. I couldn't remember his name either, but yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
I think Chris Carson is not a very talented running back. One thing that I do is I listen to a lot of different programs focused on football and fantasy football to listen to a lot of these people talk, and I don't listen to it because I believe them or think that they're good at what they're doing. I fade a lot of these programs just outright. So when people give me hyperbolic information about Chris Carson, I'm like, okay, well that's a really public side. I'm going to stay away from that. I think that Carlos Hyde had a 1,000-yard rushing season for the Texans last year. He's a very good player. He is a better pedigree player than Chris Carson. I would not be surprised at all if Carlos Hyde took over this backfield. I just think his long-term talent is much higher than Chris Carson. I don't know anything about DJ Dallas. I'm not going to pretend like I do. So my call for season-long or best ball is going to be Carlos Hyde over Chris Carson. In terms of the wide receivers, I think Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are both great plays for season-long, for DFS, for best ball. I have a lot of both of them. And then I guess the one thing I'd say about the tight ends is Dissly going to be on the field with Greg Olsen a lot? Like, I don't know about Dissly, but that's the only pushback I would have.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a
thinner play. It's
it's not
Valdez-Scantling play.
Yeah, I probably have about the same thing. Yeah, agree.
Okay, so are there any plays here that you would want in the almost perfect lineup outside of Todd Gurley? I think we agree on that one.
Yeah, I think you could throw. I think Russ, Lockett, and Metcalf all make it. Yeah, I was thinking about Jones, but I think just the price is probably too high.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I agree with your conclusion or most of your conclusion on the running backs for Seattle, I guess for different reasons. I think Carson is a lot more talented, but like Carlos Hyde, just for whatever reason, coaches love him. Like he just keeps like coming in and bolstering carries from situations that we think are going to be exploitable for fantasy for the past 3 or 4 years. Kansas City, and then Houston, and then San Francisco for a year, Cleveland. It's just like everywhere, right? For me, Carson. So I drafted Carson in the 3rd round of the FFPC main event team, just because like at that range he was sort of like the last running back that sort of you have faith has a high probability of getting 200 carries. For me, the biggest risk is his fumbling. I think everybody sort of forgets about that type of stuff, but like. He had 2, 3, 4 games last year that didn't finish, and they put in like Rashad Penny once, and like when McDavis was the season before. But and so if he puts the ball on the ground twice, and then Hyde comes in and has a good game and pass blocks well and does sort of little things that might not show up in fantasy, but coaches like on film, you might get into a split or Hyde taking over. So definitely risk there. But like for week 1, if I was going to play one of these guys, it's Carson.
Okay. The one thing I'd say about another thing I'd say about Carlos Hyde is it really stuck out in my head when he was on the 49ers and just drafted. Urban Meyer continuously said that Carlos Hyde was like the best player that he ever coached. And this was before Zeke, but that means that Carlos Hyde's probably one of the 2 or 3 best players running backs that Urban Meyer ever coached. So that's high praise from a good coach, and I think he has all the tools to be really good. Chris Carson played for Notre Dame, right?
I have no idea, to be honest.
So. I don't remember. Maybe that's why I have negative Chris Carson vibes. But so the other thing is like Pete Carroll.
He went to Oklahoma State.
Okay. Pete Carroll loving Chris Carson scares me more than the talent of Chris Carson, I guess. That's where I am. I think if you flipped Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson last year, Carlos Hyde could have had an even better season, because of like the amount of space that I mean, actually, maybe I don't know about better, but I think he'd be able to do what he did with Houston on the Seahawks. So that's basically it for this one, unless you have any final thoughts.
No, that's it.
All right, so next up we have Cleveland and Baltimore. I was on Baltimore early, and I feel like I'm going to have to get off of Baltimore early. Not a huge fan of them this year. I think that the hype is way too big. Cleveland plus 285, Baltimore minus 335. That's basically 3-1. Over-under is 47.5, which I think is probably too high, and the spread is 7.5. So which team would you like to talk about, Cleveland or Baltimore? And then I'll go first again.
I'll take Cleveland.
All right. So I'll kind of explain my negativity for Baltimore. Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. I love what he represents in terms of like offensive schemes in the NFL, and how Harbaugh uses him. I think is very smart. I'm not afraid of injury. I'm not afraid of any of those things. I just think that as time goes on, his upside, the way that his upside interacts with his salary is going to get really skewed. Like 8,100 for Lamar Jackson is probably about right, but the number of times that he pays off at 8,100 because of what he does to your roster construction probably isn't good. But again, I could be completely wrong about that. In the backfield, I think Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins both have chances to have really good seasons, like similar to what the Panthers used to do with having multiple running backs, or what the Saints were able to accomplish with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. I think that's what they envision for this backfield. Right now, J.K. Dobbins is listed as the 4th running back. Most people don't believe it, but if it happened week 1, I guess I wouldn't be too surprised. In terms of pass catchers, Hollywood Brown is going to disappoint a lot of people this week, I think, and this season in general. Has the home run hitting upside, so he reminds me of a player like that you can roster around the same ownership percentage as Deshaun Jackson or MVS, like the home run hitter. I don't think I really trust him as a week in, week out play. It's going to be frustrating, I think. Miles Boykin is a high upside player, but I think he's pretty raw. A player that I absolutely love from college is Devin Duvernay. I think that he has the chances to be the most consistent pass catcher outside of Mark Andrews for the Ravens this year. He's basically like, he did everything for Texas. He was a converted quarterback because of like injuries and stuff like that. They needed him to play some running back and wide receiver, I think. And I just love everything about Duvernay. I think that he's going to be a big surprise this year. Mark Andrews, obviously a very good pass-catching tight end. I just think 6,000 is too much for him at this point. If everybody's right and his volume increases but his efficiency decreases, he'll probably be about the same as last year, but you're going to have to pay even more for him this year. So I think that I guess what I should say is, for real-life football, I think the Ravens will be worse than they were last year. For fantasy, maybe it is sustainable. But I'm much more skeptical than most people, I think, about the Ravens.
Yeah, and so I think I'm on the opposite side. I think that it's entirely sustainable from a real life perspective. I think that so I'm an Eagles fan, but Lamar Jackson is my favorite player in the NFL. I think he is in the process of changing the game completely. Maybe not like, quickly, just because there are very few people on the planet that can do the things physically that he can do.
Yeah.
I think he is going to take a massive leap as a passer this year, and that is just going to make the running game maybe less volume, have less volume, but be more effective when it comes out. Maybe protect him a little more, less design runs, but give him a little more freedom on scrambles, which could just be an absolute nightmare for people if he because he hasn't really done that yet. So there's some hopefulness in that assessment, but again, people I trust sort of feel the same way. Warren Sharp is a guy who I think is really pun intended sharp on this stuff. So and he's been on the Lamar train from very early on, and has been banging a drum on throughout last season, showing some of the incremental progress he was making as a passer. So I agree with what you said on Marquise Brown. I think the talent's there. I think he is the kind of guy you want to play in GPPs because of that home run potential. But I don't expect him to be, Michael Thomas or Antonio Brown, where, you can depend on him for 8-9 catches every week by any means. Mark Andrews is sort of the same thing. With such a slim down tight end rotation, maybe his volume goes up. But the guy I'm actually interested in early on is Nick Boyle, just because, maybe he gets a few more passing game snaps. They run double tight, more attention on these outside guys than Andrews. So I like him as a week one play potentially, but I don't like the Ravens as much from a fantasy perspective, DFS in particular. I have Lamar on some teams from like a key because I kept him from last year. Some of my home leagues, but didn't draft him anywhere just because I think the second round or third round is too high to draft a quarterback, and I'd rather go cheap at quarterback for DFS. So barring something happening to bring his price down, I probably won't roster him much this year unless there's a ton of value on the slate. The backfield, Lamar's usage in the red zone and the lack of passing game usage for Ingram, add in the rotation, Justice Hill is a guy that's sort of in that Kerryon Johnson boat, like a poor man's, where the hype was there last year. He's the same guy. Maybe he figures it out and steals some carries and passing game usage. So just too many people there. Again, with a lot of mouths to feed. And this is the kind of reason I like guys like Cook this week. I just feel like there's so many backfields that could be a morass. That I like the guys that I feel like I have a little bit more solid expectations for. Don't know much about the rookies, but all makes sense there, given what we said about the other options. On the Cleveland side, they're one of my favorite bounce back candidates. I mentioned Stefanski earlier. I think that he will be a positive influence on that offense. I think that rookie year Baker Mayfield is the real Baker Mayfield, as opposed to last year. Could be a coin flip. PFF has been super high on Baker Mayfield. I listen to the PFF podcast pretty regularly, and Steve Palazzolo, who hosts that, has been a big Baker Mayfield guy. I think the problems that he had last year, the way they explained, sort of seem fixable. And so you get a guy in there who, made Kirk Cousins look good. I feel like Baker Mayfield's a lot more talented. The weapons are awesome there. Feels like they can be very multiple on offense with the backs and the receivers and the tight ends. I think their defense, they have, who knows how many first round picks on that defense. So I'll be interested to see how this game plays out, but my expectations for the Browns generally are high.
Yep.
And I think that the Ravens defense and their secondary in particular, when healthy, was just so good last year, that I'm going to be cautious with the Browns this week, but I think they're also going to come out swinging with something to prove. They had that really close game down the stretch last season. So I definitely want to get some Baker, OBJ, Jarvis Landry stacks.
Yeah, I think that it's funny. Let Russ cook is a thing on Twitter. It should really be let Baker bake. Baker Mayfield, same price as Kirk Cousins on this slate. I think Baker is like a great DFS play. Looking at it from like the gambling perspective, 285. Are you kidding me? What an amazing money line to bet on. Like I do think that the Ravens are the better team in the long run, and I think that Cleveland's probably closer to 40%. This should be like a 60-40 game, so I'm getting like 14 points on the money line. That's a pretty good real life bet in my opinion. With the spread, I like the spread as well. But if I'm gonna make this bet, I'm just gonna go for it with the money line. The thing about the Browns, their talent is insane with like their skill position players. They have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt could start on almost every team in the NFL. He is the more versatile running back. He is a better pass catcher than Nick Chubb. It's going to be difficult to figure out which one is going to hit every single week, so you'll probably want exposure to both if you believe in the backfield. And this is another team where we can see multiple running backs end up being very good. It's going to be hard for season-long and best ball purposes for like everybody to hit on this team because you have Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., even Austin Hooper and David Njoku. Like, it's very, very strange to have that many good players on the same offense because, like, obviously anyone can go off any week. I don't think Njoku is expected to get as much volume as Austin Hooper, but I don't know. Njoku kind of reminds me of somebody that might be Darren Waller-esque, where maybe Hooper is just treated as the actual tight end and Njoku is treated as an actual wide receiver. I don't know. That's just kind of where my brain's at right now. I love Odell. I think people hate him the same way that people hate Matt Patricia. That's why I love them even more. Odell, I'm a Giants fan, so Odell, when they got rid of Odell, I was heartbroken. He has like some of the best highlight tapes on YouTube. So if you want to hype yourself up for the football season, go look up like Odell Beckham Jr. ODB highlights. It's one of the best like highlight reels that I've ever seen, and it just gets me hyped up because I'm a Giants fan. Love Jarvis Landry. Love Odell. And then the last thing I'd say for this game is Denzel Ward is fast enough to keep up with Hollywood Brown. I think it's more of a coin flip. It's going to be tough to completely shut down Hollywood Brown because if he breaks away, even if you're 4-3-2, like he's basically a 4-3 athlete too. So if he has one or two steps on you, it's still one or two steps. Like they're not really going to be able to break away from each other as much consistently. Are there any players you like for the almost perfect lineup here? I think you probably do, right?
I would. Yeah, I would probably throw those Browns receivers and Baker on there. I think Lamar could easily be the highest scoring player on the slate, but at that price, I don't see him fitting it. And ownership, yeah. Well, I mean, like ownership, like right, if you're trying to create the perfect lineup, doesn't really matter. But yeah, just hard to see him. Don't see him as an optimal play for those reasons, as opposed to my expectations of his point production.
Okay. Next up.
And then I get just a last point. Last year, the Vikings ran 12 personnel at by far the highest clip in the league, or I guess maybe second to the Eagles, but those two were like far and away ahead of the pack. So I think you're going to see a lot of formations with Njoku and Hooper both on the field at the same time.
Yeah, so I think Njoku was considering sitting out this year, I think, and
it requested a trade at one point as well.
Yeah. So the fact that Stefanski is coming in, he probably sat him down and was like, "Listen, you're a pretty good receiver. I'm not gonna treat you like Freddie Kitchens treated you. Just come back, be a gigantic athlete, and score some touchdowns for us, and it'll be fun." I think that's probably how he was convinced to stay. Because if I was Njoku, I wouldn't want to be on the Browns either after last year. So next up we have the Jets. we have the Bills. It is Jets plus 240, Bills minus 280, over-unders 39.5. The DraftKings dashboard is telling us that it's going to be inclement weather. I don't know if that's accurate. Spread 6.5. Do you like a side that you'd want to talk about? Jets versus Bills.
I'll take the Bills.
All right, so I'll go first with the Jets. I think that the Jets plus 240 on the money line is a sharp bet. Everybody's on the Bills. It's like a pick that a lot of people are making. I do like the Bills. I like the Bills defense. I like Josh Allen. I love Stephon Diggs, but I don't think the Jets are as bad as everybody is saying that they are. Losing Jamal Adams is huge. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. But this is a spot where you're telling me the Jets need to win 30% to pay off, 30% of the time to pay off. That's very interesting to me. This could be just a classic ugly game. So the under makes some sense. The spread makes sense for the Jets, I think. Sam Darnold is not as bad as people say he is. Le'Veon Bell is one of the best running backs in the NFL from a talent perspective. I still believe that. I know that it has been a while since we've seen it consistently, but I'm not getting away from Le'Veon Bell because of Adam Gase. I just can't do it. If Frank Gore comes in and kills me, then fine. Frank Gore, you killed me. Good job. Congratulations, you ruined my life. But it's not going to make me stop playing Le'Veon Bell. I have a lot of Le'Veon Bell in best ball. For the wide receivers, Jamison Crowder, Brashad Perriman has some weird knee stuff going on, like a lot of inflammation and swelling. So I'm not sure what that's going to do to his fantasy prospects, but I don't want to play outside receivers against the Bills anyways. I think Jamison Crowder is a very good play for high target volume, so he can probably get to 20 more than his salary would suggest. So I think he's going to pay off a lot of the time. Chris Herndon, I think, is another good play this week. For the same reason, the interior of the field is really, I guess, where you want to attack because, well, I guess it's the opposite of that. The Bills want you to throw and check down to Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon probably, so they can just keep you in front and tackle. So we have to take advantage of the PPR, and then it comes down to how many touchdowns the Jets can actually score for upside. I don't think I want to stack them, but I would be fine taking Le'Veon. I would be fine with Crowder. I would be fine with Herndon as individual plays for like salary purposes or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't really have much to add, except I guess I disagree on Bell from the perspective that, and I guess I don't think the Jets have done much to improve their offensive line from last year, and I think that was really what held Bell back, not more so than like his own ability or rustiness or whatever you want to sort of ascribe it to, and especially with his running style, it's the having a bad offensive line is just problematic.
You don't have the time to be patient, which was always Bell's best attribute.
Right. Exactly. So it really neuters him in that perspective. So season long, the Jets offense concerns me because of the offensive line issues that might persist. But I think for this game, agree with all three of those guys. I really like Herndon as a player, and Crowder's a guy that I've always liked, and agree that Darnold is that the hate is sort of at this point a little overblown. On the Bills side of it, and agree that their defense is phenomenal. Tre'Davious White is a freak, so definitely want to avoid that. Just generally, on the offensive side, so I ended up me and my buddy who split this FFPC team, we ended up sort of backing into a Bill stack. So we have Diggs, Josh Allen, and Dawson Knox on our main event team, which is we didn't reach for anyone, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
But I feel like is
that best ball?
For me, Josh. What's that?
Is that best ball?
It's not. It's not. It's managed rosters. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it sort of gets into like a like a almost DFS format for the last couple weeks. When they expand beyond your league to the big group. But so like Josh Allen is a DFS fantasy player. I think because his red zone and rushing upside, that he is always going to be a great option for as long as he's doing that. I think that like cold weather gets overrated in terms of like its effect on the passing game, but like the wind in Buffalo scares me in terms of the potential for this offense on a full season basis. The run mentality of the offense last year. Just I don't know if they will. Like I could see them being sort of like Seahawks light, where like we keep being like, why won't they let him throw to Diggs more? Why did Diggs only have 4 targets? Why do they only throw the ball 20 times? Even if they're winning and like go 10-6, which would lead the coach to say like, screw you guys, like we're gonna keep doing what wins, not what makes your fantasy teams do well. And so with the Jets sort of taking that to this week, the Jets without Adams, don't know what to really make of them on defense. But I think gotta assume they'll be worse. And so I want to have some of the Bills, but again, probably similar to the Seahawks, where gonna have to factor in ownership because I think people have very high expectations and that the expectations might be a little too high. Probably like from a DFS perspective, I think as you said earlier, I think Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the league, but maybe like John Brown this week as a leverage play.
Yeah, so Josh Allen, I think, is a little bit too expensive for me to want to play him. It kind of depends on him getting into like a more of a shootout kind of game, unless he gets like 2 rushing touchdowns or something, which like we can't really project him to do that. Singletary versus Moss, I know for best ball, a lot of people are on Zach Moss for like rushing touchdown upside. But one of the people that I respect their opinion of a lot is Chris Harris, that he does like the Harris football podcast and everything. He watches all the film. He does a good job. He loves Devin Singletary, so I trust his opinion. I think that Devin Singletary will be able to hold on to that job. Even if he does lose some touchdowns, he's still going to be the more important running back for that offense. For Stephon Diggs and John Brown, I think that it's perfect for Josh Allen to have these 2 wide receivers. So I love both of them as DFS plays for the entire year. It's just going to be picking which one goes off is tough. There will be games, I think, where it's Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, double stack, huge game, one player coming back. This game is probably not the one that I want to do it because I don't really trust the Jets a lot. But if you told me on Monday that Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, and like Jamison Crowder or Chris Herndon won somebody $1 million, I wouldn't be surprised, because we could just be completely wrong about the upside in this game if the weather isn't like completely destroying the game. And then the last thing I would say is that I think the Jets defense might actually be a good play because of Josh Allen. I love Josh Allen. I think that he is a very high risk tolerance player. So he is willing to do what he thinks is going to win his team the game, even if that makes him look stupid sometimes like it did in the playoff. So I think that picking the Jets is because they're only 2,100. They do have a defensive touchdown upside. It's going to save you some money. And Josh Allen has been kind of turnover prone in the past. Not saying I dislike Josh Allen, just saying, it's still a chance that the Jets pay off pretty easily. So for the
I like that a lot. I will 100% have a bunch of Buffalo stacks with Crowder and Herndon and Bell coming back, but I love that play on the Jets D. Point I made to when we were going through this draft yesterday is like, I don't care if my fantasy defense is a good defense, and I don't care if they're up against a good offense.
Yeah.
I want them to be able to get pressure on the quarterback and get turnovers. Like, I'd rather have a team that gives up 50 and picks off 2 passes and maybe runs one back for a touchdown than a team that shuts a team out, like the Colts defense, where like they might only give up 7 points, but it's because they're tackling people when they catch the ball in front of them. You don't score fantasy points doing that. So I like the Jets could get blown out and still put up points on defense if Josh Allen throws 2 early picks and then, leads a comeback and throws 5 touchdowns or something. Like, that's, low probability, but certainly on the table.
Yeah. So do you love any of these plays enough for the almost perfect lineup?
Yeah, I think that the Bills stack, either as a one-off or I think if you're going if we're trying to do like an optimal lineup, you probably don't want a double stack in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the
more of
almost perfect lineup, it's kind of just whatever we want to put in there. Like most of my League of Legends almost perfect lineups were completely trolled based off of players' names, just random stuff like that. So for this, it's kind of a hybrid. Like we do want to have good plays in it, but
Yeah,
it's kind
fair
of
enough.
whatever we just like the most, as opposed to like
Yeah.
just trying to be the best.
Yeah, I think that Bill stack is like you said, I think it could be a winner.
Okay. Next up, Las Vegas and Carolina. Las Vegas road favorites -143 against Carolina +125. The over/under is 47.5, and the spread is 2.5. So what side do you like better, Las Vegas or Carolina, to talk about?
I'll take Carolina.
All right, so I'll go first with Las Vegas. Derek Carr, I think, is a good fantasy play basically every single week. I think for best ball, he was one of my favorite quarterbacks to try to get onto my roster. And it probably has more to do with Darren Waller than it does with Derek Carr. But I'll get onto that when I talk about Darren Waller. Josh Jacobs, good running back, scares me a little bit in terms of what his upside is. So 6,800 is an expensive price for Josh Jacobs, and he's 6,800 because he's playing against the Panthers. So I could see myself playing Josh Jacobs, but it does scare me at that price. Ruggs, Renfro, Edwards are all in play every single week because their prices are not going to reflect their upside ever, probably with Las Vegas, because there's a low public perception of Las Vegas. So I'll probably be on them all season long. I don't know how they're going to use these players, the wide receivers, but the number one target for Las Vegas is Darren Waller. Darren Waller is not a tight end. Darren Waller is a wide receiver. The fact that he lines up as a tight end is irrelevant for me for the most part. He was by far the best wide receiver on Las Vegas last year. Can Ruggs and Bryan Edwards take away some of that upside? Sure. But do I expect Darren Waller to not be a 1,000-yard receiver? No. I still think Darren Waller is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. He's going to have a ton of targets. I think he is much more likely to reach the Kittle-Kelsey tier than Mark Andrews, in my opinion. He was one of my favorite players to draft in best ball. So if he has a bad season, I'm going to look like a complete idiot. But I like the upside of the Las Vegas offense season long. And it's mostly because of Darren Waller. So I have a lot of best ball teams with Waller, Edwards, Ruggs, Derek Carr. I just love the upside of those for the prices that I had to pay for them. And I think as long as the prices stay like this on DraftKings, I'm going to be all over to Las Vegas all year long.
Yeah, completely agree that the Raiders are kind of underrated. I think people don't appreciate Derek Carr. Maybe not like a top 5, top 10 quarterback, but very, very good NFL starter in my opinion. I did not end up with Waller in any of my season-long drafts. I agree 100% with your description of him. It's like Jimmy Graham, or for those who are old like me, David Boston, who was a wide receiver back in the day, he was like 6'3", 245. The guy was a brick house, but he ran fast. And
didn't he have like some kind of really bad injury that like derailed his career?
And I think he also had legal trouble of some type.
Because I remember him in like Madden. Like if you had him in certain Madden games, I'm pretty sure that he was like in like the franchise mode when you could have him year 2, year 3. He would always like skyrocket and be like a 97 or something. But he kind of fell off a cliff in real life.
Yeah. So he was drafted in 99. Had for like 500 yards rookie year, 1,200 as a second year player, 100 catches and 1,600 yards as a third year player, and then had some injuries, was drinking, and had some trouble with alcohol, and then some domestic abuse stuff, and just after that, unsurprisingly was, or maybe not in the NFL, maybe not unsurprisingly, was sent packing. But yeah. So anyway, he's a big guy, and he's athletic, and my just concern with Waller is like do it again type of thing. It felt risky, but the upside, I think you got a discount on him for that reason. Like that's probably the reason he was going a round or two after Andrews, even though his production was much better last year. I mentioned the inconsistency of Andrews. Some games he was only on the field for like 20 snaps. Like if he wasn't running a route, he wasn't out there.
Yeah.
And then Ruggs is along with Cam, the guy I have on the most season long teams, especially in best ball. Ruggs to me he's Will Fuller, right? Like every week he's just a threat to get behind people and hit a home run. So love him any week. This week I think like all these rookies might be a little overowned, but we'll definitely want to get a couple Ruggs lineups. On the Carolina side, I love Teddy Bridgewater. I think his conservatism as a quarterback certainly, if that persists, will limit his upside as a fantasy quarterback. But I think that the upgrade from Kyle Allen to Teddy Bridgewater for the Panthers is real. I think the Panthers, if their defense plays the level it did last year, could be really good. I think DJ Moore is amazing. I think Curtis Samuel is very good. Ian Thomas, not great, but he's shown the ability to be an effective tight end. And then obviously McCaffrey. So I like the Panthers offense. I think this game could get a little shootout-ish. $10,000 for CMC is just a lot.
Yeah.
He could pay it off, I guess. He could go, especially if Teddy's just dumping the ball down and they have to keep scoring. Sure, rack up points, but I prefer stacking up Bridgewater with these wide receivers or bringing these, I think you could stack either quarterback with its Waller in the case of Carr and bring it back with someone from the other team. I like this as a stack.
Yeah, if I do one of those stupid stacks that you were talking about where it's like 3 players from one team, 2 players from the other team, just hope for that like ridiculous game, this is probably the game that I would try to do it on, just because I think a lot of the ownership is going to be low enough on the Las Vegas side. And I agree with everything you said about the Panthers. That's basically it. You didn't mention Robbie Anderson, which I think is another potentially good thing for Carolina, but was Teddy really like a deep ball thrower when he filled in for the Saints last year? Like I feel like he didn't really go deep very often.
Yeah, I don't recall off, can't say for sure, but that's certainly my what I remember too. And certainly his reputation is being, a sort of West Coast dink and dunk type guy. But if nothing else than just taking the top off the defense, I love Robbie Anderson when he's with the Jets. I think he's a great at what he does. And I don't want to, probably not a guy I want to play. He was hit or miss as the number 1 receiver, and now with lower volume, even more so. So I don't think he's a great DFS option. If the MBS will display, maybe a lineup here, but I definitely want to focus on Samuel and DJ Moore, who I think are both super talented if I'm going to the Panthers passing game.
Okay, and then do you have any like inside information about Rule or no?
Not really. He where's this? They brought the offensive coordinator from I remember. Joe Brady. So Joe Brady was
LSU
offensive coordinator and the involved with the Saints offense for a long time. If he was the quarterback coach or whatever. So I would expect them to, like, the Saints offense is so multiple, right? Like I think what Sean Payton has done so well is match his offense to his personnel subtly almost. It doesn't seem like there are these seismic shifts, but if you think back about like those early Kamara Ingram teams were super run heavy when you actually look at the numbers. And and they just from year to year will shift and sort of make the personnel work. So you saw what he did with Joe Burrow. So I think that's it's unknown, but I certainly you can come up with a way that it works out well in your head.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, plays for the almost perfect lineup from this game. I think that
Play everybody.
yeah, Ruggs, Waller, Bryan Edwards. Carolina's defense is going to be horrible this year, is what most people are saying. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm willing to use that as justification for playing Raiders. Christian McCaffrey is in consideration for the almost perfect lineup, but does a lot to like kind of limit what you can do. DJ Moore, this is a good price for DJ Moore. So definitely some players to consider from this one. Next up, we have the Chargers and Cincinnati. What side would you like to talk about?
I'll take the Chargers.
All right, so Cincinnati. Oh, okay, so the Chargers are road favorites, minus 143. Over/under is 42. The spread's 2.5. Cincinnati's plus 125. Joe Burrow. I was kind of late to the party on him last year in college football. My brother like made a decent amount of money on LSU last year. I think he just continuously bet them every single week. And Joe Burrow was obviously a big part of that. It'll be interesting to see if he can succeed without like the talent disparity between their team and everyone else. But I guess he has all the arm talent to do it. But I'm probably more skeptical than most people on Joe Burrow. I hope it works because it'd be a lot of fun to watch if he can take that same kind of success to the next level. In their backfield, Joe Mixon, very good player. He's one of Chris Harris's favorite running backs, so I think from a talent perspective, I have to just assume that he's right about that. Giovanni Bernard is one of my favorite players in the NFL, just because he was one of the original like pass catching running backs to break PPR leagues. So a big fan of Gio. Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, John Ross, I think all make a lot of sense. Auden Tate is supposedly still going to get some targets. T. Higgins, I don't know how they're going to involve them. So the wide receivers are pretty scary for me, especially against the Chargers. When you attack the Chargers, it's much better to go on the ground against them. So Joe Mixon probably has additional upside this week. If it turns into a shootout, which I think is a little unlikely, even though it seems unlikely to me. But if the Bengals are playing catch up, I could see a Giovanni Bernard paying off. But at 4,400, I don't love it. So this is kind of where the new DraftKings pricing kind of makes these thinner plays more difficult to get in. I don't really have any unique opinions about the Bengals, though. So what do you think about the Bengals this year?
Yeah, I'm not completely sold on Burrow either. Not that like I'm knowledgeable enough in terms of like breaking down film or watching these games to have my own opinion, or based on anything he's done. Just 1 year at LSU, as you said, with the talent disparity, does not convince me that he will be. He's a slam dunk NFL quarterback. Yeah. So, but with that caveat, I love the talent around him. I probably don't like mixing. I can't separate like some of the personal stuff from his on-field stuff, and so I've always sort of had like a negative opinion of him. But the talent is there, and like I love Tyler Boyd. I want AJ Green to still be good. Agree with you on Gio. John Ross, when he was healthy last year, looked like he was really starting to put it together, and is just fast as can be. So the Cincinnati offense, I certainly see the potential for them. And I thought I can't think of the name of their coach right now, but thought he did some really interesting things. He's a McVay guy. So they had it's certainly feasible. I don't think I want to really love any of them this week because I think the Chargers are underrated. I love their defense. Their defensive line harasses everyone. Their secondary has been one of the best in the NFL for the past couple of years. I'm drawing a blank on the safety's name, who was hurt. Derwin James missed part of last year, but he's basically like West Coast Jamal Adams. rushes the passer, play some linebacker, play some safety. It's just you can line up anywhere and really make your defense versatile and multiple. Bosa on the edge. They're just a really talented defense. And then
Derwin James is out though.
Is he?
He's
okay. I did not know
for the
that.
season. He's done for the season.
Gotcha.
He got hurt
So,
in like
yeah,
one of the last plays of like training camp or something, like from Hard Knocks.
Gotcha.
But
So
still
this
really
is where I'm
good
behind. So yeah, so I think certainly, certainly there was a noticeable drop off for that defense when he was out last year, so it hurts. But that was sort of more my roundabout way of coming to. I love Tyrod Taylor. I think he's really good. Team Ty God all day. So I don't have. I think him being there as opposed to Phil Rivers will hurt Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. But I don't think it's going to like hurt the team as a whole. I think that I think their record will be basically what it would have been if Rivers stayed.
Yep.
And I'll be interested to see how they use their backs. I love Eckler as a player. And my only question really is volume. Like, are they going to give him a chance to be the guy, or are they going to mix in Kelly and Jackson and turn this into another RBBC? I'm going to play some Eckler this week and hope that he's the guy. I'll probably have a little bit of Justin Jackson and maybe even not. Now that I think about it, it just seems like too remote to really sort of bet on, that. But I'm gonna have a ton of Tyrod. It's one of my favorite cheap quarterbacks. He's got the rushing potential. When he was the starter in Buffalo most recently, I think he averaged like 36 rushing yards a game. That's an extra touchdown. So those rushing yards add up fast, even if he doesn't get into the end zone. They've got the running game. They've got some options there. So and the offense also looked much better last year, late in the season after they let Ken Wisenhunt go. I forget the name of their guy, but he was like the quarterback coach before, young guy, another one of these sort of innovative thinkers. They were a lot more creative. So I think that with maybe incorporate some elements of some of these teams are doing with more mobile quarterbacks like Wilson and Jackson and stuff. So I'll be interested to see what they look like, but I definitely want to have some Chargers.
Yeah, I love the Chargers defense as a high upside DraftKings play. They are 2,800 against a rookie quarterback. They generate a ton of pressure, like you said. I think the fact that Derwin James isn't there is going to hurt a little bit in terms of real life, like being able to stop teams when they need to. But at the same time, it'll probably make teams feel more comfortable taking shots against their secondary, where we're going to get additional turnovers. I don't know if that really makes a lot of sense logically, but it's like, if Derwin James is there, you don't want to go anywhere near him. So the fact that he's not there makes them take more shots. That's kind of, I guess, the logic. Not sure if that's convincing or not. But the fact that there's going to be so much pressure, rookie quarterback, I do like them as one of the top defenses this week. Can you hear the screaming going on downstairs?
I cannot.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, good for all of us, other than you, apparently, and whoever is screaming.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. So that's enough for that game, I think. Almost perfect lineup plays. Do you want to throw Tyrod in there? Or Tyrod, or however you're supposed to say his first name. I think it's Tyrod, but
Yeah, I think you're right. You can put him on there. It's I don't know who I would play him with here.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So Baker against Tyrod, what do you think? Same price, basically, 56 versus 57.
For a cash game lineup, I would take Tyrod. For my GPPs, I would take Baker.
Okay.
I think with like Tyrod, he's less dependent on other pieces, and just cash game, right? I just rather sort of spread it out more and sort of not. Yeah, I don't play cash games ever, but I don't really stack. In the rare cases I do.
Okay. Still have two more games. We're going real long, but I mean, this has been a lot of good information. So let's just keep going. Tampa Bay, New Orleans. This is another game that I think will attract a lot of eyeballs because it's Tom Brady and Drew Brees and people like them. So what side would you like to talk about?
Um, I'll take the Saints.
All right. So Tampa Bay plus 150, New Orleans minus 175. The over under is 48. The spread is 3.5. Tom Brady. I mean, we don't really have enough information to figure out what their offense is going to look like. It should just be an upgrade over Jameis Winston, but Jameis is more likely to take the deep shots, I think. So I don't know. I don't like Tom Brady in this spot at all. If I'm being honest. Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, LaShawn McCoy, a lot to kind of parse through. We don't know who's going to get the most touches there. I think Ronald Jones makes sense for a GPP because maybe he is as good as he was at the end of last year. Tough to say. Mike Evans is questionable with a hamstring injury. But it's also Marshawn Lattimore. So I think even if Mike Evans is not 100%, they'll put him on the field. Marshawn Lattimore will line up against him probably, and then Chris Godwin will be the number one target. So I definitely prefer Godwin over Evans. If Evans play, I would have exposure to him, just because maybe they're overplaying the severity of the hamstring. There are some like possession receivers on the Buccaneers that are supposedly going to be involved, but I don't know enough about them to trust them. Then we have Gronk, O.J. Howard, and Cam Brate. All three of those guys could have a touchdown, and I wouldn't be surprised. So it's a lot of names to take into consideration for Tampa Bay, which is causing me to have like a dumbfounding situation. Like I just don't know anything about this. But my gut says New Orleans is a significantly better team than Tampa Bay and will destroy them. So I love the New Orleans side for a real life bet. I think 3.5 is a joke. It should probably be closer to like 7 or 8. So that's probably my favorite play of the week for a spread bet.
I'm right there with you. Another backfield morass. I had a ton of Ronald Jones last year on my teams, and like he was getting sniped by Peyton Barber. So like now you got Leonard Fournette and you've got Coy, you've got Vaughn. I don't know what they're gonna do. Jones was already getting sort of like the work you didn't want him to get, and now that would be presumably what Fournette gets. Tight end. I love O.J. Howard in season-long formats, especially if they run a little more double tight. Just maybe the talent finally comes through, and again, like a Kerryon Johnson type guy. He's going in the 18th round this year. He was in the 4th round last year. Like Gronkowski's there, but how many snaps is Gronk really going to play? The concern, right, is touchdown is probably siphoning touchdowns because I think he's still a viable red zone threat, at least on when you look at him and think about it. So we'll see if he can do it. I don't trust Brady at all. I mentioned earlier that I think that the Patriots dynasty was probably more Belichick than Brady, in my personal opinion. And I think Jameis Winston is a better fit for what Bruce Arians wants to do. I think Bruce Arians is a really sharp guy, and I think we could see, maybe he tweaks the offense, but like even Godwin last year at his most effective was like running these deep seams, like the old passes that Gronk used to run kind of for Brady. And Brady really didn't throw those as well last year. You saw him miss and kill Harry. Just part of that was separation, but Tom sort of lost his fastball a little bit. Again, this was like a PFF thing. Was what they would say, right? If there's no pressure and he sort of can put his back foot into throws and his mechanics are spot on, he's fine. But at 41, if he's off his spot, if he's moving, if he doesn't really get his body into it, the fastball is not there and the ball floats a little bit and it's just not the same. He's a year older now. It's a new system. And maybe that's new inspiration. And it's like, this is getting into a narrative street a little bit now. But for all those reasons, I just don't trust this Bucs offense to be as dynamic as some people expect it to be. Godwin would be the one I trust the most, but I'd still rather see him do it and Brady get him the ball. I'd be fine missing out this week if they go off. On the New Orleans side, even Breeze, I'm a little concerned. Like with age, like all these older quarterbacks every year, I sort of question it, and then they go off, and I look like an idiot. So eventually they'll retire, and I won't have to do that anymore, and I can move on to like the next generation of guys to doubt. But Scotty Miller on Tampa Bay, I think is supposed to be their slot guy. He's
Okay.
4K, which is a little expensive, but I want a couple lineups with him. I thought he looked good last year in a little bit of cleanup work down the stretch before he got hurt. On the New Orleans side, Tampa Bay over the past couple of years has just bled to pass catching backs. So I want Kamara on a lot of teams here. I just think he has, obviously has the upside there. And Tampa Bay is a good spot for him to hit his ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Thomas may be a little too expensive, but you can always play him.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how much volume Emmanuel Sanders gets. I think his role might be bigger than people are expecting. I was like surprised by his ADP for season long. I thought he would have gone a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And Tampa Bay's secondary last year came on at the end. But like the way they're built is mostly like a lot of big, strong, fast guys. Like their corners look like safeties. So it feels like a good matchup for a guy like Sanders, who's a little bit quicker and can maybe just find some space underneath and rack off some catches.
Yeah, I think that before I forget about what I was going to say for the Bucks, because you mentioned Godwin and Evans, I think Godwin, even though I think Scotty Miller is the trick play this year. I think that people think to themselves, they need this possession receiver. He's going to be operating in this part of the field. He should be able to get a lot of targets. I think it's more likely that Godwin ends up playing the Edelman role with a lot of double tight end sets. And then you have the 2 wide receivers, a running back, the 2 tight ends. That way you're still getting Gronk plus O.J. Howard, Gronk plus Cam Brate plus O.J. Howard, just like rotating them in and out of the game. Then you'd be able to have better run packages probably. And then you still have the upside of Evans on the outside, who can play the Randy Moss role when Randy Moss went out of control. Or Godwin playing the Edelman role where he can get out of control. So I think that there are definitely some concerns with the amount of targets that Godwin and Evans can get. But I think the upside justifies playing them like in almost every single matchup. For the Saints, I agree. Alvin Kamara, obviously, you can play him any week. Thomas, you can play him any week. Emmanuel Sanders is another Chris Harris guy. He's really big on Emmanuel Sanders. Traquan Smith has been getting talked up in camp, but how much of that is real, I have no idea. Jared Cook is very annoying to play, but he's another guy you can run out basically every week when the price tag justifies it. But right now he's $5,500, which is a bad price for Jared Cook. So
The week I won the millie was Traquan Smith week, so I will always and forever love Traquan Smith.
That's so funny. Yeah. So any guys here for the almost perfect lineup? Just so many names.
Yeah. The way now that we've, as I said, this is a little bit of a for me. Now that we've gone through this, I feel like my build is going to be like my preferred build is going to be cheap at quarterback, cheap at wide receiver, and expensive at running back. I might even try to jam him in with like a Kamara Cook, and then find value elsewhere. I think we've named some cheap receivers that we like. That the Carolina, like maybe like a Carolina Oakland stack, and bring it back with Cook and Kamara. You could probably fit that. Mm-hmm. So I think that might be the only guy for me, just given my doubts on Tampa Bay. You could probably throw Sanders in there, but I think if I'm going to play one Saint, I'd rather play Kamara.
All right, fair enough. Last game before we get into the almost perfect lineup. Arizona, San Francisco. What side do you like?
Give me my Cardinals.
All right, so I'll take San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo, not a good quarterback. Period. I have no faith in Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that the 49ers, with a lot of other quarterbacks, would have won the Super Bowl easily. I don't know. I just don't like him. I don't think he's very good. Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Jerick McKinnon. I'm a big fan of Tevin Coleman, but just it's so much uncertainty surrounding their backfield. It's tough to pick any of them. Mostert had some good games against the Cardinals last year, if I remember correctly. Deebo Samuel has been ruled out for week 1. So Kendrick Bourne is somebody that people have been talking up as a big target monster for week 1. Brandon Ayuk is still questionable, so they have like Dante Pettis. Maybe he gets more run as well. The best player on the 49ers offense is George Kittle. He is going to have the most targets for this team probably, unless Kendrick Bourne goes off. But I think that if I'm the 49ers and I want to win this game and I have a lot of injured players on my team, I'm going to run the ball down Arizona's throat. Arizona is a team that a lot of people have talked up in terms of their defense being much better this year, but I'll have to see it. Jordan Reed with so many concussions. Every time he plays football, I'm afraid that we're going to watch somebody die on a football field. So I think if he gets out there in some like 2 tight end sets, I think he could be a sneaky play where you're getting a lot of Jordan Reed, George Kittle on the field at the same time, both running routes. Be pretty cool to watch, but maybe I'm just wishful thinking at that point. So I don't love a lot of the San Francisco players for this slate. If I played any, it'd be Kendrick Bourne or George Kittle one-off. That's all I got for this one, though. Not very attractive to me.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm also not a big Jimmy G guy, but I am a huge Kyle Shanahan guy.
I like Kyle Shanahan a lot.
Yeah, and I don't didn't take as anything otherwise. But I think sort of further to the point, like he makes life so like Jimmy G looks the way he looks with Kyle Shanahan making life so freaking easy for him.
Yeah.
As you know, in terms of you know when you're talking relative to it for playing quarterback in the NFL. Love the play designs. Like just you see some of these things where like he's just manufacturing guys open. Really creative stuff. And so I think that they're like, I'm fine playing Jimmy G, even though I don't think he's that good because I want to play Kyle Shanahan's offense. Another backfield morass, like people, you know, Mostert's another one where I ended up with him in a couple leagues, but like Jerick McKinnon's back. Like there's just mouths to feed. I could see the backfield going a lot of ways. If Ayuk plays, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of him. I typically shy away from rookie receivers, especially week 1. But we saw Shanahan get Deebo involved pretty early on and a willingness to trust him. So that gives me a little more faith here. And Kittle, another one, always in play. Expensive, so you know maybe it doesn't fit, but could play him. And right there with you on Jordan Reed. Glad he's out of the NFC East because when he does play, he always seems to score 2 touchdowns. And then he misses the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, true.
So I hope he stays healthy. I like him as a player and could really make that interesting if and a matchup nightmare if he's out there with Kittle. On the Arizona side, you know, San Francisco's defense got rightfully all the publicity it did last year. They did show vulnerabilities, especially when some of their key players were out. Who I think they've got, you know, most of them back, both, you know, injury wise and free agency wise. Quan Alexander being the big one seemed to be a huge linchpin for him last year, as well as their nickelback, whose name I forget, who tore his ACL late in the season and missed. I think he's still sort of working his way back. But those guys I see as kind of the key here, like the sort of coverage linebackers and secondary for the Niners. I love Arizona. You know, I buy that hype. I think Kingsbury is I was a big Chip Kelly guy when he came in. Like, I think that I think these college concepts will work in the NFL, and it's just going to be a matter of having the right personnel, right person, and all that sort of the right mix to make it work. And we've seen it work. Like the Chiefs incorporate a ton of college concepts and whatever. I didn't end up with any Kyler Murray except where I could keep him in season-long leagues, but had he not gotten hyped up like he was coming out of last season, who I thought would be this season's Lamar, I expect him to have a phenomenal season. I think they're going to be throwing the ball all over the place. I think he's going to add a lot more sort of running to his game, just given the space that offense creates. I don't really believe in Kenyon Drake. I mentioned earlier I'd rather have Chase Edmonds from a season-long perspective, but I think whoever the running back is here is going to have just massive holes to run through, given the amount of field that the defense needs to cover. So I want to play the Cardinals offense this week because I think they're going to be low-owned because of the matchup. Maybe they get shut down and we have to take advantage of that. But at some point here, I just think this Carolina team or this Cardinals team is going to go off for 45 points and 600 yards, and you're going to want to be in on it. And the Niners gives you the leverage chance to get it at really low ownership potentially.
Yeah, definitely like Kyler. I don't like Kenyon Drake. I'm not convinced by Chase Edmonds, but it makes sense for season long more than DFS, I guess, in the short term.
It's like not so much a bet on Chase Edmonds.
Yeah.
The cheaper guy there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hopkins, I mean, even if the volume goes down, I think Hopkins, it's interesting. Like, Hopkins is like the best one of the best possession receivers in the NFL, even though he's an outside guy. Like, he doesn't really does he really score that many long touchdowns where it's like a 50-yard touchdown, or is it more like he has 17 targets, has 10 receptions, gets one or two like 20-yard touchdowns, and then is just like a monster that way? Because it seems like he's pretty similar to like Larry Fitzgerald when Larry Fitzgerald was at his prime. Christian Kirk might get more of those high leverage targets where he's like breaking free down the field. I think you have to have exposure to all of them. Maybe not Larry Fitzgerald as much, but I agree. I think that Arizona's interesting from the DFS perspective at low ownership. I think they make sense as a money line bet. Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, and I agree with your breakdown of the receivers too. I think Hopkins, I want to see how they use him. Like, I think he could be either like season long, either underdrafted or overdrafted, depending on how that all shakes out. If the volume's down but the ADOT is still low, then you got overdrafted. But if the volume is there and or it's further downfield targets, then maybe he should have been a sort of late first round type guy, early second round. And don't know how they'll use Fitz, but I think Christian Kirk is really good, but not like good enough to be the primary option in a passing game. And like if he's sort of now Will Fuller, where you just can't put two guys on him because you need two guys on DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
Could really open things up for him.
Yeah. That's basically what I'm thinking as well. So
yeah.
So let's do the almost perfect lineup. We might include some of these guys from the last game, but we can just go through it. So first, let's figure out quarterbacks. So we have Cam, Phillip Rivers, Russ, Baker, and Josh Allen. So what's your lean? Like, if you just had to quick pick a quarterback, who would it be?
Like my like blink choice is Russ, but I don't like the price and the ownership. I might go Derek Carr. Was he on the list?
He wasn't, but we talked about stacking both sides of the game. So I think
I like him better. Like, he's the same price as Bridgewater, and I think I like than Teddy for this game.
Yeah, I think my two favorite plays at quarterback this week are probably Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield. So I like the Derek
Yeah.
Carr. We can start off with
Yeah.
Derek Carr. So
I like the matchup better for Carr. But I'm there with you. Yep.
So if we went with a stack off of Derek Carr, who are the players that you would want to kind of get into the same lineup?
I think I'd probably go. I think for the start of the build, I'd probably go for like a double stack with Ruggs and Waller, and then bring it back with Moore.
Okay. So we've got all those players locked in. Running back, we have Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Alvin Kamara, J.D. McKissick, Chris Thompson, and Antonio Gibson should probably be on the list just because like he will be a player that determines how the slate goes because of how much he's going to be owned. So, out of those running backs or some other running backs that we've gone over, who do you think you would want to throw into the almost perfect lineup?
So I'm like playing with it here on my side too. Like I want to jam in Cook and Kamara, only two guys I trust. Which maybe isn't like the best way to think about a GPP build, but it gets tight at the last couple spots.
So you pick one of those running backs because I'm putting Todd Gurley in the lineup.
I would, in that case, I'll take Cook. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I'll take Kamara. I thought that the Saints and Falcons are playing each other.
All right,
So
so
Kamara and Gurley.
yep. So we have Derek Carr, Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Ruggs, DJ Moore, Darren Waller. We have a wide receiver, a flex, and a defense. So you can pick. Do you want to fill in the wide receiver spot, flex spot, or D spot, and then I'll pick another one or a different one.
I'll fill in the D slot so that we can figure out how much.
Damn it! I wanted to pick defense. I want the Chargers.
No. You can pick it. I just wanted to pick. I say we pick defense next, just so we can get
Okay.
I'd rather do that and have like a gauge of how much we have left to spend at those two skill spots.
All right. So the three defenses that I would think that I would try to put into this lineup are the Jets, the Lions, or the Chargers. So I think the Chargers are my favorite play. I definitely like the Chargers as my favorite play. If it's between the Chargers Lions, I'd pick Chargers every time. If it's between Chargers Jets because of the salary difference, I would definitely consider the Jets a lot of the time. So I guess those are the two that we should pick between. So Chargers 2,800, Jets are 2,100.
They're both predicted to be relatively highly owned, so no real difference there. Let's go with the Jets. I think they'll be that. I don't trust that ownership as much. Like I feel like a lot of people will be like Chargers against a rookie quarterback. Let's fire them up. But Jets give us a salary relief, and I think we'll have.
Yeah. All right. So the last slot that we can fill in, it's going to be wide receiver or the flex. So it's really, I guess, whatever your favorite play is. We have 5,500 remaining. So if we went with like a min-priced running back, J.D. McKissick, Chris Thompson, Antonio Gibson would make sense. Then we'd have a little bit extra play with like a wide receiver, or we can go for like a mid-price wide receiver, or just whoever your favorite play on the board is.
So if you plug it, I'm just plugging in someone cheap to see what the money looks like here. So yeah, if you throw like a 4,300 person into one of those slots, you're left with like 68. So like a high 6 is sort of your like realistic ceiling here. I think I'd probably go Tyler Lockett at 65. I also like Diggs at 64, but since we have the Jets D in there, I obviously don't want to do that. So I think I'd go Tyler Lockett at 65, and that would leave you with 46 for the flex.
Yeah, that's the the first player that I looked at was Diggs as well. So like you're probably not killing yourself playing them against each other, but I think Lockett plus Gurley makes sense as well. So 4,600, the types of players that you're looking at with your remaining salary are Sony Michel, Latavius Murray, Carlos Hyde, Dede Westbrook, Curtis Samuel. So another player. Maybe we get 2 players from that game in there. That could be pretty interesting. Preston Williams. That's actually a pretty good play. Probably go there.
Yeah.
Preston Williams. There are so many
You might-
players
and-
in this range though.
Yeah, and actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think I'm more interested. I feel like I'd rather, in this sort of, if you go back to the 2 empty slots, I kind of like the guys. I think I'd rather go with 2 guys around that 5,500 range. You got Terry McLaurin at 56. You've got Lev Bell at 56. You could get the correlation with Jets D there. John Brown at 56. Marvin Jones, Jared Cook, Mark Ingram. So I'd probably go 56, 55, and probably split that remaining money pretty much down the middle.
Good call.
I think I like those builds a little bit better.
Yeah. Terry McLaurin. Marvin Jones is a little chalky, but I think we have enough lower owned plays where it's not going to be a big issue.
Agreed.
So I think that's basically it. I know this is a long video, but for people who need a refresher on new faces and new places, general ideas about some of these teams going into the season, I think that this is going to be an invaluable source for people building lineups for next week. And I'm sure we'll probably try to do this again next week. I'm sure it'd be a little quicker because we didn't have to go over some of the changes that have taken place. But any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, this was super helpful for me. I actually know which teams are playing each other this weekend now, so that is a step forward from where I was before the video. No, look, I think it's gonna be an interesting weekend. To me, the feel of this is I kind of want to get contrarian at running back and defense, I think. And with the exception of that Carolina Las Vegas game, I do like a lot of the chalkier passing game stacks. I think the Seattles, the Seattles, the Buffaloes. I do like those, so I like the idea of getting a little different with the Chris Thompsons and even the McKissick play and stuff like that at running back to give you the space and the unique.
All right. So for Billy and Pikel, the legend himself, the 2 winners on the League of Legends slate today, that would be us. That's all we got. So basically, the other video to expect, I'm gonna do a shorter video for this with the almost perfect lineup as the centerpiece. But make sure you check back in next week for the review, and we'll give you our thoughts about next week as well. Thanks for watching and sticking around, and I'll talk to you later.